Hey listeners, how are you all? Thank you so much for being our awesome members. Join Patreon if you want. Lemon's link in the description. There's a lot to come more. Sit tight, be comfy. Put your headphones, now let's begin. Hello dear readers. This is my first time trying AbondenedFic and I hope you enjoy it. I was watching KHR and I couldn't get Suna's hair out of my mind. It kept reminding me of Harry's hair and then I started getting ideas. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction people, we can't all be geniuses at literature. Chapter 1. Rebirth. If there was one thing in the world you could ask for, what would it be? Fame, fortune, or maybe a lifetime supply of churros, who knows? I'd you asked Harry Potter what he'd want, the answer you'd get would surprise you. He didn't want gold or jewels, what he wanted was to simply end the hell that is his life. Harry Potter didn't want to open his eyes, he didn't want to have the small amount of hope he had gained that perhaps this time it would be different, that this time he would open his eyes and find himself with all his loved ones, his parents, best friends, his beautiful snowy owl that had died so long ago. The only memories he had of her were the cold, dead eyes staring at him after she got hit by that stray curse that terrible day so many years ago. He knew he couldn't go on pretending he couldn't hear the noises from the hospital, the nurses congratulating the woman holding him on what a healthy baby she had, of the smell he experienced each and every time he found himself in the same situation. Harry Potter was cursed, the moment he had achieved the most sought-after wand in the world. The moment he spun the resurrection stone in his hand, the second his innocent 11-year-old self had opened a mysterious Christmas present, only to find out it had been his father's. He should have never touched that cloak. If only he had known that his life would quickly spiral into the hellhole that he was currently in, he would have never touched the stone, never become the master of death. It had all seemed so easy. He had never coveted the Elder Wand, placed it back in Dumbledore's tomb, never to see the light of day again. The stone had been lost in the forest, never to be seen again. The cloak he had kept, to do with as his ancestors had done, to give it to his heir. He had been happy, married Ginny, had 3 children, and they had been happy. His children grew up, he became a grandfather, a great-grandfather even. He had grown old, and then died peacefully in his sleep. That's when everything went wrong. He had expected to finally be able to be with his dead parents, friends, even the man he had once thought of as a grandfather. But instead of that, he had found himself in a white void, with a figure dressed in a black hooded cloak, a figure that he would hate more than anyone he had ever hated in his life, even Voldemort. Because while Voldemort had taken many of his friends and family, he had always known they'd be reunited again in the afterlife. The figure he later learned to call Death, carefully explained that while he had done everything in his power to get rid of his unwanted title, once the Deathly Hallows were united by one person, the title would forever be theirs. That was when he learned the truth, that being the master of death wasn't a privilege, but a curse. He would never see his loved ones again, forever would he be banned from the afterlife. Cursed to be reborn again and again in different worlds, time periods, and countries. At first he had fallen into a well of despair, his first life spent with I.M. pursuing any leads he could find about anything remotely like his curse, but after wasting a whole life searching, he found that it was useless to waste away for something that seemed impossible to achieve. After that it had quickly fallen into a routine of sorts, be born, go to school, get a job, and later die. Of course, there had always been some lives in which his routine wasn't the same. In some lives he was considered a prodigy, with an intelligence that rivaled many of the greatest minds in history. In other lives he successfully blended into the shadows, helping many people behind the scenes. A memory of Hermione telling him about his saving people thing, reminding him about his first life, never letting him fully let go of the life that had been his first, never letting him forget about his first family. Many of the worlds he was born in were the same, yet some others were so different he had to learn to adapt rather quickly if he wanted to survive. He treasured the few lives in which he could live as an ordinary person, free of the burdens the wizarding world has once thrust upon a small 11-year-old boy, a boy ignorant of the dangers he'd face once he entered. He couldn't help but hope. After each of his deaths, that perhaps his torment would finally end, that he'd be allowed to be reunited with his loved ones, only to be crushed every time he woke up to see the sweaty but joyful face of his new mother. Harry Potter opened his eyes and saw a woman with light brown hair and kind eyes staring at him. The nurse looked at her and asked her in Japanese, "What do you wish to name him?" The woman looked down at her son, smiled and said, "His name will be Tsunayoshi. Sawada Tsunayoshi." 5 years later, Sawada household. Nana Sawada was a normal housewife. She was married to a lovely husband and had 2 beautiful baby boys. Her oldest, Natsumi, was currently 7 years old, while her youngest, Tsunayoshi, was 5 years old. Today was the day her little Su-kun would begin school. She couldn't wait for her little boy to begin his journey to the world of academics. She just knew he'd excel if he tried his best. Her oldest, sadly, disagreed with her and always tried to annoy his younger brother. But she knew it was all in good fun. Her 2 boys loved each other. Sometimes she wondered who the oldest brother was. Her youngest always seemed to turn every juvenile insult thrown at him by his 7-year-old brother around, so Natsumi ended up in trouble. Nana's mind decided to change the subject as she once again began to wonder about her Suna's first day of school, and what she should make for his lunch. Harry Potter, or as he was called now, Sawada Tsunayoshi, was lying under the large tree in his backyard, reminiscing his past 5 years as the son of Imitsu and Nana. At first, he had been content with the ordinary life this had been turning out to be, with his new mother always cooing and playing with him, and his idiotic father doing imbecilic stunts while his mom stood by, amused. But then one day, a few months after his 2nd birthday, his mother had left to buy some groceries and had left him in the care of his father, when a strange man came into the room along with another man. Both of them wearing fine quality tailored suits. That was the day he discovered his father's secret. He worked in the mafia, the Italian Vongola familia to be exact. So many things had been unearthed that day. His father's position as the CEDEF leader, and the possibility of him and his older brother Natsumi of perhaps becoming the next boss if the others died. It had seemed very far-fetched. Due to there being more than 2 other possible, more likely candidates, children of the current Vongola Nono. Of course, he knew all about the mafia, specifically the Vongola familia. After all, once upon a time, his name had been Giotto, and he had once gone by the title of Vongola Primo. Flashback. Giotto was lounging on a couch, trying to get a few hours of sleep. NDLING. A mafia familia wasn't as easy as some made it look. It wasn't all booze, money, and women. There were assassins, familia members to take care of, other mafia families either asking for an alliance or ordering him to help them with other troublesome things, but the thing he loathed more than anything was the paperwork. Almost every hour of his free time, and maybe even when he was fighting, he had to deal with paperwork. Mountains and mountains of paperwork. But he knew all his work was worthwhile when he saw the happy expressions on his guardians, when he noticed all the good he was doing for his people. On those days, he felt like he had finally done something important, and that his curse could be good for some things. But then he'd get depressed, remember that eventually he would die, and never see any of his precious friends again. Whenever he thought of that, he also grew his resolve, and promised himself that no matter what happened after his death, the Vongola familia would continue to prosper. End of flashback. Suna sighed. He had known the silence wouldn't last. No matter his previous lives, he had always kept an eye out for the Vongola. Always in the shadows, he helped out when he could, saving some people from unfortunate assassinations, helping to hack into another familia's files, and making silent donations, not that they needed it. But he had never taken an active role in the Vongola. Not after his time as Giotto. It would have been too painful to remember his guardians, his best friends. So as he slowly stood up to head into the house, he decided he would be as ordinary as possible so the mafia wouldn't be interested in him. He only hoped his brother was lucky and the other heirs to the title of Vongola 10th remained in the living plane. He didn't want to know what had happened if too much scrutiny was put on his family. Even with thousands of years of advantages against others, he had never quite gotten over his saving people thing, so he wouldn't be held responsible for his actions should anything happen to his brother. Hello there, class. My name is Yuki Nakamura, but you can call me Yuki-sensei. My god, I'm back to primary school. I don't know how I'll survive this all over again. Suna was bored out of his mind. Throughout his previous lives, he'd slowly grown to detest the time he had to spend in the educational system. During some of them, he'd acted like a prodigy only in order for it to go by quicker, but he soon found out it was an even worse chore. People always expected him as the prodigy to finish school early and get a career as a neurosurgeon or something equally hard, and he'd also get ostracized by the others because they thought he was a snobby know-it-all. I learned that lesson, thank you very much. Now, what to do, what to do. He was sitting in the back of the classroom while all the other small children were introducing themselves to the teacher, staring out the window. Maybe in this life I won't be anything special. I think I'll try for a bit below average grades, maybe even be slightly clumsy, and get a job as a sushi chef or something. Yes, if something mafia-related happens, I'll just remain oblivious and quietly stay away. Pretending to be a below-average, normal human boy. He nodded happily to himself. He finally had a plan. As long as nothing happened he would keep his mask on, ever letting the world know of how dangerous he could really be. He began to notice that the teacher had been calling him over, and decided that now was as good a time as any to practice his new facade. The students watched as he slowly walked over, and fell flat on his face. Suddenly, all the kids were laughing, talking amongst one another. Did you see that? He fainted on thin air. I know, what a loser. Even my 3-year-old brother can walk better than him. As he slowly walked over, he hid a smirk. And so, it begins. Neither Suna nor any of the kids noticed a small black-haired boy standing in the shadows staring after the brunette, the only one to have seen the boy's carefully hidden smirk. Hello readers. I can't believe I'm actually publishing this. I actually wrote most of T's chapter almost a year ago and I found it a few days ago, kind of surprising how I forgot about it really. Anyway, I don't know if I'll continue this, but don't expect any updates very soon. So far I'm only working on my Doctor Who fic. And I don't want to become one of those authors with like 20 fics that they leave unfinished. Tell me what you think. What are your ideas on Suna's Watcher? Don't forget to review. Chapter 2. I decided I just couldn't abandon my new readers, so starting from now on, expect at least one chapter every 2 weeks. I don't really update on specific days. So there might be 2 weeks between chapters, or maybe less than 3 days if I feel inspired enough. Chapter size may vary, but I'll try to keep it above 2,000 words if possible. On another note, congratulations on those of you that guessed. Hibari is Suna's Watcher. I hope you enjoy the next chapter, 'cause I sure enjoyed writing it. Chapter 2. Su-kun. Wake up or you'll be late for school. His mother's voice woke him up. Great. Another day of primary school, how much worse could it be? The day before had been so boring. He'd had to sit in a circle with a bunch of other children, playing ridiculous games and singing along to a teacher that treated them like 5-year-olds. Oh wait, they were 5-year-olds. You don't know how lucky you are, Natsumi, he thought as he looked through he window and watched as his older brother raced towards school. That's another thing different about this life, he thought. I've never had any siblings in any of my previous lives. I always wondered why. He couldn't decide if having an older brother this time around was a good or bad thing. He'd always imagined that having an older brother meant he'd feel protected and more loved, but that didn't seem to be the case here. He wasn't sure when it started, but ever since as long as he could remember, his brother had hated him. Sure, when you think of siblings you all know that they don't usually get along. But his brother wasn't like that. He never spoke to him unless it was to call him names, and he shoved him whenever he walked by. Suna let it go, because he knew he was a mature adult. And he wasn't stupid enough to pick a fight between him and his brother. It would only strain their relationship even more. Sometimes I wonder if that relationship I'm looking for is worth it. As the years had gone by, Natsumi had only grown colder towards him, and he didn't know why. Perhaps it has something to do with that idiot father of his. Maybe he's just angry and taking out on me. Suna had stopped calling Imitsu his father when he was 3, after he finally had enough of the man's lies to his family. I mean, working with penguins in the North Pole. Is it even possible to Up with a more imbecilic excuse to all his absences. He couldn't even comprehend how irresponsible that man was. His whole marriage was built on nothing but lies. He hadn't come to visit his mother in more than 6 months. And even then it had only been for less than a week. Sometimes he wondered if he cared about his family at all. Well, at least I can't say this life is boring, he finally admitted to himself. As he said goodbye to his mother, he thought once again of how boring the following hours at school would be. He didn't know how wrong he was. Hibari's paw, the herbivore, was doing it again. Acting as if he's clumsy while hiding smirks under his fluffy brown hair. I wonder why he acts like such a weak herbivore. It's obvious he's acting. Hibari had been watching Suna as he remained quiet and slightly awkward looking while the other kids were playing around and laughing. This herbivore is different. I just have to figure out why he's acting like that on purpose. Hibari, Ho had always felt mad at all the stupid children around him, disturbing his quiet moments, was confused as to why this particular herbivore seemed so different. It must be this strange feeling, as if he's not a real herbivore, but rather an omnivore. Yes, that's why he stands out in this room of weak herbivores. He's hiding his true self. He smirked. I'll just have to force him to stop acting then. Suna felt someone following him. All throughout his day at school he had felt a presence watching him, not malicious, just curious. But now, the feeling was replaced by another one, and this one was malicious. He decided to see what the person wanted and aimlessly took a wrong turn into an alley. He slowly turned around and saw that his would-be assailant had revealed himself, and the gun he was carrying. The man was no one special. He was an average height with brown hair and brown eyes, totally invisible if you pass him on the street. The perfect assassin. Well, so this is the CEDEF leader's youngest, huh? You don't seem like much, but then again you are a 5-year-old. Suna was inwardly cursing Imitsu. Imitsu, you idiot, what kind of father are you that you can't even hide your family life from the freaking mafia? The man smirked and spoke again, taking his silence as fear. Well, let's get this over with. I have your brother to find later after all. Oh no, that bastard did not just mention killing his brother. Suna had at first just decided to run like hell and call the police or something. The man who dared call himself his father probably had some type of protection for his family, right? But then the man mentioned his brother, and so, once again cursing his saving people thing, he acted. Instantly, he activated his flames, realizing that it was much harder. Probably because he hadn't used them in years, and jumped over the assassin. Before the other man could react, he had hit both the man's legs, and he screamed as he could feel the leg bones breaking. Once he had taken the gun from the now very weak grip, he turned the man over and pointed it at his forehead. Who do you work for? The other man was looking at him with fear, but he kept his mouth shut. Suna pressed the gun against the man's forehead and he finally spoke. I'm not working with anyone, I swear. I'm a freelance assassin and I managed to find information on the Vongola CEDEF leader's family. I just thought he'd pay ransom money for you. I wasn't going to kill you, really. Suna could tell the man was lying. You're lying. The man's terrified face grew paler. No, it's true, I really am. Suna shot the man in the leg. Tell me who sent you. The man finally deflated, and told him the name of his employer. The Varia. Suna was for once speechless. The Varia. Why would the Varia, an organization that works for the Vongola Familia, organize the assassination of 2 of the possible heirs to the title of Vongola Decimo? Unless the person that ordered this is another candidate. A candidate that doesn't want any competition for the title of boss. All of a sudden, he saw a shadow jump down from a building and take the man he was pointing the gun to. Crap, I didn't even see that. He knew that it wasn't his fault the man got away, his body was only 5 after all. As he saw the 2 figures leave, he knew that his secret would be safe with them, after all. What kind of man would admit he got his butt kicked by a 5-year-old? He threw the gun into the alley after making sure it didn't work, of course, and started walking away. Suddenly he heard it. Omnivore. He turned around. Fight me. The first thing he thought when he looked into those eyes was, he looks like a lord, when he suddenly found himself dodging the boy as he threw himself at him. He once again dodged the boy's very accurate kick, and suddenly spun and dove for a kick of his own. Suddenly, he jumped away. What am I doing? I promised myself I'd be average, and all of a sudden I'm fighting with another kid. I got to get a hold of myself. The other boy looked mad that the small fight seemed to be over, but looked at him and said, I saw you fight Omnivore, and I won't tell anyone if you agree to spar with me twice a week after school. They both stared at each other until Suna decided that his day couldn't possibly get any worse, so he might as well agree with strange boy that didn't seem fazed by the fact that an assassination had almost taken place in front of him. I guess this is as good as I'll get without threatening him, and I really don't want to threaten a 5-year-old. No matter how much he looks like an old friend of mine. Both agreeing to keep their mouths shut regarding what happened only moments ago, they walked away. After he got home, he had to explain to his mom why he was late, and after he assured her he was fine, he walked into his room. He lied down on his bed and thought about the mysterious boy. Who was he anyway? I guess he was that same presence I'd been sensing earlier today. Kind of strange how he never said anything about what the assassin said, or what happened. Perhaps he has family in the Mafia, or as it's called here, the Yakuza. The likeness to Alad was astounding though, perhaps he's one of his descendants. What a coincidence, I get Reborn looking similar to my life as Giotto, and here I find an Alla Uday lookalike living in the same place as me. Throughout his life he had learned many things, but one of the most important had been, there are no coincidences. He suddenly remembered a mysterious man he'd met during his life as Giotto. The same man that had given him the rings now known as the Vongola rings, and the last things the man had said to him. I'll be seeing you again Giotto, you and your guardians both. He'd always wondered what he'd meant with those words. The man who'd never given his name had always seemed like he knew more than he let on. Somewhere near Namimori, two men were driving away in a van. They were on their way to the airport, to catch a private plane to take them to Italy. Before either man knew it, the one driving lost control of the wheel and they crashed. Both died on impact. In a room with an unlit fireplace, there was man sitting on an armchair, staring outside as his sun sank and the night began. So it's finally started, huh? I guess I'll see you soon Giotto, or should I say, Tsunayoshi. I've worked hard on this chapter, but I'm not sure if I gave Hibari the right personality. I also think that the scenes seemed a bit rushed, but I suppose it's just 'cause I want to get to the actual plot. I'd appreciate it if you reviewed telling me how I did, or if any of you have some advice, especially in fighting scenes. As you might have guessed, I try to avoid those sometimes. Regarding the pacing of this fic, I was thinking of doing another chapter with Suna and his brother a few weeks after the events of this chapter, and then doing a time skip R2 until I get near the start of the actual plot events. Thanks for everything and don't forget to review. Chapter 3. Warning. This fic may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere. I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. I know that some of the ideas for this fanfic aren't very original. But because this is my first Zover fanfic, I feel more comfortable writing about similar things to other stories I've read before, and when you really think about it, I haven't read any other Harius Suna fics, so it's not that unoriginal, right? I also know that some of you think that the whole Suna has an older brother who was originally chosen as Decimo and also bullies him thing is overused, and I agree. Which is why later on at around chapter 5 or so I plan on adding my own spin to it. Sorry for my rambling, and without further ado, here is chapter 3 in Death's Curse. Death's Curse. Chapter 3. Suna walked out of the school building and strolled towards Hibari's meeting place. For the past 3 months, he and Hibari had gotten to know each other better. For example, now he knew what his name was, Hibari Kiyoya. And he also knew that Hibari never called anyone by name, preferring to call everyone else herbivores. He also found out that he was the only one Hibari called omnivore, something that he thought probably happened after Hibari saw the fight between him and the assassin 3 weeks before. He still couldn't understand why Hibari hadn't mentioned that fight. He hadn't even been remotely curious about the huge flames on his hands, for God's sake. But then again, Hibari didn't seem like the type to get fazed about anything. Hibari also reminded him of a friend from long ago. Alad. It seemed like his previous life as the Vongola Primo would haunt him throughout this life. Hibari reminded him so much of Alad, his aloof cloud guardian. He and Alad could have been identical twins if not for the difference in hair and eye color. Hibari preferred to be alone, and didn't like crowding, something he tried to get rid of by attacking the people around him. He liked to lie down under a sakura tree and stare at the clouds, often falling asleep while doing so. Suna always felt the most relaxed while around him. As long as they weren't fighting, of course. As promised, he and Hibari began to have fights every once in a while, and while he did win a few times, Hibari won just as many if not more often than him. The fights had clearly showed him that he had UCH training to do if he ever wanted to reach his ultimate goal of having the power levels he'd had during his time as Vongola Primo, so in between fights with Hibari he would often go out alone to train. Once Hibari had found out about this, he'd said it was better if they trained together, and to stop acting like such a herbivore, scared of asking for his help to get stronger. Of course, he still kept up his clumsy and foolish facade while under the scrutiny of other children and adults. It had gotten to the point that everyone started to call him Dame Suna. While at first he hadn't appreciated the silly and insulting nickname, he'd ignored it in favor of hanging out with Hibari. He was kind of reminded of his first childhood, except this time he had a loving family and didn't care much about the childish taunts. Hibari seemed to not mind, because they didn't talk while at school, Suna reading a book while Hibari took naps and glared whenever someone accidentally woke him. He and his brother had reached an accord as well. Natsumi was now ignoring him, something he thought might have to do with the meeting between his brother and his first friend. He had every reason to believe that Hibari must have persuaded his brother to stop bothering him. He flinched whenever Hibari's name was mentioned. He supposed this was the best it was going to get between him and his brother. At least they managed to have conversations once in a blue moon that actually ended with no yelling and name-calling, which was a step in the right direction at least. Today was May 5th, Hibari's birthday. It had taken sneaking into the school archives in the middle of the night to get said information. Hibari would have never told him the date himself. Suna had gone to a martial arts weapons shop in town and used almost all his money to buy the best tonfas they had. Why tonfas? Well, he'd remembered Alad's handcuffs and thought of a suitable weapon for his only friend. Immediately zooming in on the tonfas, he'd decided they would be the perfect weapon for Hibari and bought them. At least now Hibari would have something to fight with. Suna found himself staring at the huge gates of the Hibari household. He'd never have imagined that Hibari was so rich. Usually rich children went to a different school for the upper class. So he'd had a bit of a shock when he saw how big his house was. Here goes nothing, he thought as he rang the doorbell. No more than a few seconds passed and soon he found himself staring at his friend's annoyed face. Ah, hello Hibari-san. Hibari looked even more annoyed. Why are you here, omnivore? We haven't agreed to meet today. Suna decided to just give his present and go. It didn't seem like Hibari was up for any company for his birthday. Don't worry Hibari-san, you didn't forget anything, it's just that I found out it was your birthday so I wanted to give you a present, so here you go. He shoved the gift into Hibari's hands and ran away as if the hounds of hell were on his heels yelling goodbye as he left. He really doesn't like his birthday, does he? He thought. Hopefully he won't throw away his present. Suna stopped running and headed home. Hibari's paw. Hibari was irritated. It seemed like sometimes the omnivore still forgot about his mask and acted herbivorously at times. He looked down at the package and opened the box. He stopped to stare at the tonfas. Wow. He closed the box and started walking towards the house, shutting the gate behind him. I suppose I can try out my new weapons with the omnivore tomorrow. Anyone who saw Hibari now would be scared shitless, who knew what a maliciously smiling Hibari was thinking of doing. Suna was tired. He had never regretted doing anything more than giving Hibari those tonfas. Why couldn't I just give him something nice, like a book or something, at least that wouldn't have hurt as much while being thrown at my head? He hadn't thought of the repercussions of giving Hibari the weapons, it seemed even now. After hundreds of years he still did things before thinking something like, I wonder what Hibari would do if I gave him something to more accurately hit me with. He cursed his naivete. He sometimes wondered if he'd inherited this from his current mother. She sure as hell acted naively whenever Imitsu's job came up. Back to the cause of his pain. Large, purple bruises could be seen all over his arms and legs, and he could also feel some on his chest. Thank God for my rapid healing ability. This body is way too young to have to go through such harsh training. I wonder how Hibari does it. Single quote. Ever since his first rebirth, he'd been left with some of his magic, but never as much as he'd had as Harry Potter. In some lives he'd gotten strange supernatural powers such as telekinesis, power over the elements, or as he had now and while he was Giotto, sky flames. The only constant had been his healing abilities. Something he was now very thankful for. The last fight with Hibari had been brutal. The way he used those tonfas, you'd think he'd been using them all his life. Suna had actually had to use some power from his sky flames in order to strengthen his body and raise his speed. Sometimes he wondered if Hibari subconsciously used his flames, and if so, which flames did he have? If I was betting on which one, I'd say that he's got a cloud flame, just like a lot. He reminds me of a cloud, moody and aloof. He suddenly felt sorrow. This always seemed to happen when he thought of previous lives, Giotto's in particular, due to both looking in the mirror and spending time with his one and only friend. Every single day he was reminded of what he'd lost in all his lives, by looking around a park and seeing happy families, children playing together. He'd never had the chance to act like that when he was a child, and now it just wasn't the same. He wasn't actually a child after all. You've got to remember that he's not a lord, and that your life as Giotto has long since passed. God, look at me, giving myself advice. I guess I am going crazy, but then again, compared to Hibari, I'm probably the sanest guy alive. He had done his best during that life, and he was proud of all the things he'd accomplished with the help of his friends and guardians. The years of running Vongola had long since faded away, still able to be remembered, but not something he thought of every minute of every day. He had to think of the new threat to his family. He'd almost forgotten about the assassination attempt. If it had been his brother instead of him, things might have turned out differently and he would have been mourning his only brother by now. He couldn't let things continue the way they were going. Someone had sent that assassin, someone in the Varia. He knew all about the Varia assassination squad, of course. He just thought himself lucky that the man they'd sent hadn't been anywhere near the famed Varia's level. He wasn't foolish not to think that he would have lasted anything more than a few minutes in the condition he'd been in back then, with his physical fitness level at an all-time low, his flames the only thing to have saved him. Every day was spent watching his surroundings, anticipating that at any moment more mafia members would pop up and try to kill him or other members of his family. The only problem, of course, was that he couldn't be with his mother all the time, and his brother even less. They were both very clearly in danger, yet Imitsu didn't seem to have done anything about it. There was no extra protection around the house, or even the school Natsumi went to. Didn't the man even care to think of the dangers his job as CEDEF leader would bring to his poor unassuming family? He really wondered sometimes what went on in that man's head. Alad had been the first head of the CEDEF, and had run all operations in an efficient, yet most of the time brutal manner. He had been one of those people that enjoyed fights, another reason why Hibari reminded him of his now long-dead guardian. He wondered how much the CEDEF could have fallen to take such an idiot as that man as its leader. Well, if that man doesn't want to protect his family, I'll have to get stronger to protect them myself. He had always taken those in his family directly under his protection, and many a life of his had been lost. IGHTING, the people who dared to hurt or kill his family. To him, family was the most important thing in the universe, and he'd do anything in his power to keep them safe. On another note, I sort of meant for this to be a filler. And next chapter will probably have a time skip. If any of you get tired of Suna's long monologues to himself, don't worry, because next chapter I think will skip to a few weeks before Reborn's arrival. Maybe to set the stage on how things have gone in the past 8 years. Thanks for reading, and don't forget to review on your way out. Chapter 4. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Chapter 4. 8 years later. Su-kun, wake up. Your brother already left for school, you have 10 minutes. A thump could be heard from downstairs as Suna fell out of bed, feet tangled in the covers. It seems no matter what, I'll always be a late riser, seems like some things never change. Ever since life number 13, or was it 15, he had received the habit of being unable to wake up early in the mornings. If he tried hard enough, he could probably get up as early as he wanted, but he decided against it, being late helped with his Dame Suna facade anyway. And it also irritated Hibari. Both him and Hibari had come a long way from the small, weak, in Suna's case, children they had been. Suna had become much more nimble and strong, though it didn't show much, seemed like this body wouldn't get any taller or larger. He'd been furious when he figured out that he had to stay at a below-average height for the rest of his life while Hibari reached a respectable height for someone their age. Hibari had also grown into his strength. Nowadays it seemed like his tonfas were an extension of his body. He'd grown into a fearful person. The moment they had both started attending Namimori Middle, Hibari had become curious about the disciplinary committee. It hadn't taken more than 5 days before he beat the head and took over as head prefect. All the other prefects had become very loyal to him not soon after. At first, many had been against it, of course. I mean, how could a 12-year-old discipline others twice his age? People hadn't paid attention to him, disrespecting his authority and crowding in the school's hallways. Hibari eventually taught them to treat him seriously after he beat 4 upperclassmen in what everyone was able to tell had been a one-sided fight. Soon people began to fear Hibari, especially whenever they heard his new favorite thing to say, "I'll bite you to death." Indeed, Hibari was very feared, something he seemed to enjoy as it made sure that all the herbivores wouldn't crowd and disturb the peace at school. The only aspect of Hibari that many people didn't understand was his friendship with Suna, now affectionately called Dame Suna by most of the school's population. Including some of the teachers, Suna and Hibari's apparent friendship continued to confuse others. How could Dame Suna, a clumsy idiot that could even manage to trip over air, keep the friendship of the scariest student in the school? Hibari was known to act harshly on those like Suna. Everyone knew not to mess with Suna, or bad things would happen to you, very bad things courtesy of a certain Skylark. Of course, Hibari took it out on Suna as well sometimes, chastising in his own way, trying to explain to Suna that he was tired of beating up insolent herbivores for annoying him. But Suna knew that Hibari was aware of exactly why he hid his actual abilities. After the first few years of his friendship with Hibari, Suna figured out that it was impossible to keep the whole mafia people coming to kill him thing from Hibari. So one day, after the 5th assassination attempt since that day when they had met, Suna told Hibari the truth. Not the whole reincarnation thing, of course. Just the whole, "Oh, you know what? My father works for the mafia, so me and my family have assassins come every once in a while to kidnap and or kill us." Hibari had been very understanding, more like apathetic, to his plight, and from then on, Hibari helped him dispose of any evidence from the assassins. He had also never asked how he'd gotten all the information he had on the mafia. Another thing he liked about him. Apparently Hibari had contacts within the Japanese police through his family, so making sure the bodies of assassins went away became his job. They both knew that Suna was trying to distance himself from the mafia as much as he could, because he'd explained about how he and his brother were both possible heirs to a mafia family. If he suddenly started showing off his real abilities, it might gain the attention of someone from the mafia, and he really didn't want that to happen. The only thing Hibari had actually forced him into was becoming he disciplinary committee's secretary of sorts. It was Suna's job to file paperwork, mountains and mountains of evil paperwork, fetch Hibari his coffee. To not do so would make for a very angry Hibari. Something he had found out after he forgot one time, and occasionally clean up after Hibari bit someone to death. He'd gotten used to the work, and it also gave him an excuse to give to his as to why he was getting such failing grades. She had grown surprisingly used to her son's bad grades and seemed to be unfazed towards his academic failures. Ironically, Hibari was so busy with the committee, he apparently didn't have time to attend some of his classes, so Suna had to tutor him every once in a while. Suna and his brother's relationship was slowly getting better as well, it seemed. Med that all the popularity his brother had because of his prowess with all kinds of sports really helped with his anger issues towards his younger brother. He still didn't acknowledge him while he was around his friends. But there wasn't any hate sent towards him, not like before. In the past 8 years, Imitsu had only visited 4 times, something that seemed to depress his mother no matter how happy she seemed on the outside. While everyone mostly only saw Nana's happy exterior, they didn't bother to see the loneliness in her eyes whenever her husband was mentioned. From conversations he'd be listening in from the shadows the few times Imitsu was there, it seemed his clumsy act had ridden him off of the Vongola heirs list for good, unless all the candidates died as well as his brother. Something he would make sure didn't happen. According to Imitsu, he was the baby of the family, the weak one that was always protected by his brother or his friend. His brother was the smart one, with his slightly above average grades and his supposed popularity among his peers. Apparently he hadn't heard of all the assassins that came looking for them, too busy with CEDEF business to send even a few undercover agents of his to protect one of the possible heirs to the title of Vongola Decimo. Recently, he'd acquired a decent laptop, and had managed to hack into some Vongola files. Nothing too top secret of course. But apparently all of the current Vongola Nano's children had met unfortunate accidents in the last few months. First, the heir Enrico was shot and killed in a gunfight. Then the second eldest son Massimo drowned, and the third son Federico was killed through unknown circumstances and only his bones had been found. The only candidate left was Natsumi, who even after a LL these years remained oblivious to Imitsu's real job. Suna had found out that Nono had planned to send one of the legendary Archibaldano, Reborn, to Japan in order for him to teach Natsumi how to become a good mafia boss. The only problem was that Suna didn't think Natsumi would be the right person for the job. While he and his brother got along well, he knew that his brother just wasn't able to handle the responsibility of being given free reign of Vongola. Natsumi just didn't have the leadership skills to be able to take over such a large, influential group of people, no matter what Imitsu may believe. He acted as if he was the leader of that little gang of his, but Suna could see that he gave in too easily to others and was only being led on. He would become a figurehead at most. While his brother was friendly towards his friends, and on occasion to Suna, he wasn't the leader type, he was more of a follower. If he becomes Vongola Decimo, he might become a puppet for the more powerful in the Familia. Something that would cause chaos among the Vongola. At least I've heard some good things about Reborn, maybe he'll be able to help Natsumi. He is one of the Archibaldano after all. Yes, I think for now I'll stay in the shadows and see if my brother can handle things. Suna smiled as he ran towards school. I'm sure you'll be a great teacher, Reborn. Somewhere in Italy, in a dark and dreary street, there was the sound of someone walking, the noise so soft it was barely heard. The person turned and entered the small bar. 2 men sat at the counter, drinking and smoking. One of the men turned and said, "It's Reborn. Looks like you were called by the old man again." The person who had just entered the bar was a small baby. A baby wearing a black suit and a fedora with an orange stripe on it. On his neck, a yellow pacifier was hanging, and on his hat, a chameleon he affectionately called Leon sat, lazily staring at the other 2 in front of him. The second spoke as well. Must be tough being popular. Going to Rome next. Venice. The small baby didn't look up from under his hat as he said, Japan. What? Both men were clearly shocked. The old man must have finally made up his mind. Reborn just looked down and said, "Looks like it's going to be a long journey." As Reborn began to walk towards the bar, the door suddenly opened with a bang. A man with a knife suddenly lunged towards the baby, clearly intending to kill him, when suddenly the assassin found himself at gunpoint. Die. A bang was heard from the quiet street while an indistinguishable figure crossed into another building nearby. The man in the iron hat smiled, satisfied that everything was going according to plan. "Let's see what you make of the next few years, Reborn. I wonder who will win this little chess game of ours. The question is, who will choose the next move, you or the little Vongola?" No one was aware of the events that would soon befall the small town of Namimori. On a plane headed to Japan. Reborn was currently on a plane bound for Japan, and he was going through all the information he had on Natsumi Sawada, the CEDEF leader's son. After the death of Vongola Nano's 3 sons, he had been chosen to be the tutor of the only remaining heir to the family, Imatsu's son. While Reborn had still been in the middle of training his very stupid, clumsy pupil Dino, he knew that the Vongola familia was much more powerful than the Cavallone family, so Reborn had said goodbye and left for Japan. He read through the papers once more. Natsumi Sawada, currently 16 years old, lives in Namimori, Japan. Gets slightly above average grades and has strong leadership skills. One of his school's idols and star of the soccer team. He also plays basketball, volleyball, and baseball. Apparently he has a younger brother, Tsunayoshi, but there isn't really anything on him on these papers. Only Imatsu rambling on how he's not allowed to know anything about the mafia. With the information he found a picture of Natsumi. He was a boy with blonde hair and a handsome face, but Reborn knew you needed more than that to survive in the mafia. Well, I'm sure I'll get to see what kind of person he is along with this Tsunayoshi, and no matter what Imatsu said, I have to tell the other brother about his father's job. What if he gets attacked because of his brother? As the plane continued its flight, Reborn sadistically smiled as he planned what he'd teach his newest pupil first. You better not waste my time, Natsumi Sawada. Next chapter I will definitely cut back on the dialogues and add more interaction between characters, something that I don't think I did enough of in this chapter. The plot twist I was planning on using regarding Suna's brother will come into play next chapter, and let me tell you, I don't think it's ever been used before. Get ready to be surprised. One of the questions I wanted to ask was, should I follow the manga or the anime? Personally, I'm more familiar with the manga, but I'm open to your opinions. Don't forget to review Chapter 5. Thanks to all of you who reviewed. I enjoy hearing about your opinion of my story, and I just wanted to say that if you have any advice, I'd like to hear it. Constructive criticism is a good thing after all. I started writing this FIC as a way to improve my writing, so I won't be going back to change things from my previous chapters unless they cause problems for the story, because I want to go through the story to see how my writing changes throughout the next chapters. Starting from now on, I'll try my best to make sure that I spend more time on character interaction and their surroundings and less on the information overload I found myself writing in previous chapters. Warning: this FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 5. It was the early hours of the morning in Namimori, Japan, so no one saw nor heard the strange suit-wearing baby walk towards the Sawada household and leave something in the mail. The Sawadas along with their neighbors were all asleep, not aware that in the following hours everything would change for the normal, relatively quiet streets of Namimori. As the baby walked away, he smirked from under his fedora. Wow, what a nice day it is today, huh, Natsu-kun? She looked over to her oldest son. He had soccer practice to attend, so he'd woken up earlier. Natsu-kun, would you mind going upstairs to wake your brother? I want to talk about something to both of you, okay? Natsumi didn't reply, just walked upstairs. He poked his head into his younger brother's room. It hadn't changed much over the years, with his bed on one side of the room and 2 bookshelves on the other, filled with books that Natsumi knew his brother to have read at least once before. He wondered how Suna could read so much and yet get such low marks at school. The room wasn't tiny, but not overly huge like some of his friends' rooms, and the walls were painted orange, his brother's favorite color. There was a small desk in one corner with a wooden chair which he used for homework, and another beanbag chair in the corner he used to read. Looking at his brother, he could see Suna sleeping with his head under his pillow. Getting ready to yell, he quickly walked over to Suna in order to be standing right over his ear. "Tsuna, wake up." It was funny seeing his usually well-composed brother startle, falling off the bed in his hurry to find the perpetrator of the scream. "Natsumi-kun, I'm tired, let me sleep for a few more minutes," Suna drawled. Natsumi, of course, didn't listen, so he just came over to Suna and told him that their mother wanted to tell them something. "Ka-san wants to tell us something." Natsumi smirked at his brother's drowsiness. He always got like this in the mornings. Yeah, I don't know why either, but hurry up. It seems important. He walked out of the room as soon as he saw that Tsuna was getting changed. It seemed that he was also intrigued as to why their mother would call for a family meeting of sorts. I wonder why. Tsuna was curious to see why his mother had woken him up so early. She usually let him sleep for as long as he wanted, telling him about how she knew growing boys like him needed their sleep, not seeming to care either way as long as he got to school on time. After getting changed into the school uniform, the tie was particularly difficult. Even after all these years he had trouble with them. He headed downstairs to find Natsumi eating in his own plate of breakfast filled with pancakes. Good morning, Ka-san. His her just smiled and waited after he finished his breakfast alongside his brother. Natsu-kun. Su-kun, I have wonderful news. I was going through the mail today and I found this flyer for a live-in tutor. It's even absolutely free as long as we provide a place for him to stay and food. Isn't this great? She started to read the flyer. We'll raise your child to be the new leader of the next generation. Grade and subject doesn't matter. Reborn. Immediately Natsumi was up, claiming it was probably a scam or something, while Tsuna remained in his chair. So he's finally arrived, Reborn the Archibaldano. Slowly, everyone noticed as the front door opened, and in walked Reborn. Chaosu. Nana was confused. Hello there, little guy. Are you lost? The baby just looked at them and spoke. I am the home tutor, Reborn. Suddenly the toy everyone had thought was on his hat moved, and when he saw them looking at the now revealed chameleon he added, and this is Leon. Natsumi looked incredulously at the baby. You mean you're the tutor? But you're a baby. Suddenly Reborn appeared in front of Natsumi and kicked him in the head, knocking him to the floor. Nana just said, "Oh look, Su-kun, Natsu-kun and Reborn are playing." She smiled at the three of them and walked away. Maybe I should make some food for Reborn as well, he must be hungry. Tsuna's sweat dropped. I really love you, Ka-san, you are way too oblivious for your own good. It seemed the force behind Reborn's kick had knocked Natsumi temporarily unconscious until their mom spoke and began to walk away. Suddenly he jumped up. Don't make any food, it'll make him think you fell for his trick. He can't be a tutor, it's just some baby playing a prank or something. Reborn didn't look happy. Suddenly, he was holding a green gun which he pointed at Natsume's head. Before he knew what was happening, Tsuna found himself in between the gun and his brother, shielding him from the possible injury. Reborn looked surprised, but quickly regained his superior smirk. Move, Dame Tsuna, or I'll shoot you. Tsuna shook his head. No, he wasn't going to move until Reborn put the gun away. It seemed his plan worked because a few seconds later the gun was gone. And then he felt a kick and fell flat on his back. Wow, no wonder he's one of the Archibaldano. I didn't even see that coming. Of course, Tsuna knew that while using his aims he might have been able to block the attack. He wasn't that bad while without them. Either, you'd have to be good to be able to fight against Hibari for hours on end and win sometimes. In a few years, maybe by the time he reached 17 years of age he might even win against Reborn, but for now the baby was far more superior. He slowly stood up, masking the pain he felt as best as he could. That Reborn seemed to have appreciated. Suddenly, the baby started walking up the stairs and entered Natsumi's room. Tsuna's brother still hadn't said anything about the scene that had taken place earlier. Asking himself why his brother would risk his life for him, while they barely got along most of the time. Once everyone was in the room, Reborn started speaking. The truth is, I'm not here to help you get better grades. My real job is to make Natsumi a mafia boss. Natsumi sat very still, staring at the baby while Tsuna did the same. Reborn noticed that the younger brother didn't seem very surprised. Something he'd have to figure out later. After a few more seconds of staring at Reborn as if he had told them aliens were real or something equally ridiculous like that, Natsumi fell on the floor, laughing. Ha 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 ha. What are you talking about, baby? Is there something wrong with your head? Reborn looked down at the floor. Do you want me to shoot you? Tsuna looked at the baby wearily. Reborn seemed to think about it and walked away. Maybe later. Natsumi looked at Tsuna. Hey, why are you so quiet? Don't you think it's ridiculous that some baby can just come into our house? and suddenly decide to train me as a mafia boss? On the other hand, why didn't he say anything about you? And why did you stand between us when he was pointing that toy gun at me? Suna looked at his brother. It wasn't fake. Natsumi took a long look at his brother. Suna's expression was dark, as if something bad was going to happen, something he was dreading. But he couldn't believe what had just happened. I mean, babies in the mafia, me as a future mafia boss. How am I even eligible? I'm just some kid that lives a normal life, I've never even had contact with mafia people. Suna just sighed and looked over at his brother. Maybe you should just go along with it until you see why the baby's really here. Natsumi just sat while his brother walked downstairs and started heading towards Namimori Middle. That day, after so many years of being late or barely on time, Suna got to school early. Natsumi was heading to school, and suddenly he found Reborn walking alongside him. Hey baby, don't you need to go to grade school or something? Go away, why are you even following me? Reborn just replied with, assassins don't go to grade school. Natsumi stopped walking. Cut it with the mafia act baby. I've got better things to do than listen to you talk about your crazy delusions. Suddenly a girl from Natsumi's class walked past him, and Natsumi stopped for a few seconds to stare goofily at her. She was tall with dark brown hair that reached her shoulders. Reborn looked at him. Do you like her? Natsumi turned red. It's none of your business baby. I can read minds. Reborn said this with a serious face so Natsumi couldn't tell if he was lying. That's enough. Just leave me alone. Suddenly he found his arm twisted behind him as Reborn said, no. Okay, I give. Let go of my arm. Reborn let go. Have you told her? Of course not. She's dating one of my friends. Reborn just looked at him as if he was an idiot. Then tell her about your feelings and fight for her love. Suddenly the gun was back. Die. Natsumi barely managed to see the bullet come from the gun and then he felt as it went through his forehead. I'm going to die, and now I'm leaving the world. I should have told her with my dying will, I should have confessed, told her how I felt. Natsumi suddenly burst out of his clothes, and while only wearing his underwear yelled. Reborn, I'm going to tell Yamanaka Sakura how I feel with my dying will. A flame was flickering for all to see on his forehead, and he spared a few seconds to notice he was almost naked, while soon after he began running after the girl. Reborn, for the first time ever began to get the feeling that his stay in Japan had just gotten more complicated. Something had happened, something he didn't think anyone could have imagined. Those weren't orange sky flames, those were green lightning flames. Reborn started walking after Natsumi, following the trail of destruction left by him in the usually peaceful and quiet streets of Namimori. This changes everything, I have to send a letter to Nono immediately. If only he knew that this new revelation was only the beginning of what was to come. I hope this is Origi. Null enough for those of you who are tired of the older brother. Plot twist. In this chapter, you got to see much more character interaction, so I hope you enjoyed it. As for the description of the characters' surroundings, I'm getting there. Next chapter we see the complications recent events caused, and a conversation between Suna and Reborn. Hibari might also make to the next chapter, and maybe I'll add a small scene in Imitsu's POV. By the way, I'm not that good at coming up with names for OCs, something you probably noticed in this chapter regarding the name of Natsumi's crush. Once again, I took some dialogue from the manga to help with this chapter, but don't worry, I'll start deviating from canon at around chapter 10 or so, definitely before the Kokuyo arc. Thanks for reading the latest chapter in Death's Curse. And don't forget to review. Chapter 6. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction people, we can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 6 feat. This is a disaster. The normally calm and composed Timoteo, also widely known throughout the underworld as Vongola Nono, didn't know what to do with the current disaster. It seemed he had his hands tied when it came to the whole affair regarding his successor, the soon-to-be Vongola Decimo. When the leader of CEDEF, Imitsu, had come to him all those years ago and made him swear that he'd never involve his youngest son in the mafia, and to only consider his oldest, Natsumi, as an heir, he had agreed. thinking it would never get to the point where Natsumi would be the only heir. In retrospect, he has been way too naive regarding the possible death of his other heirs. He was the head of a mafia familia for God's sake. He should have anticipated something like this would happen, especially after the Cradle affair a few years ago. His 3 sons, the only successors apart from Natsumi in Japan, were all dead. And the only available heir had been Natsumi. His poor sons were gone from this world, and here he was, forced to make another hard decision. Xanxus was out of the question, especially because he knew the Vongola rings would never fully accept someone who wasn't his actual son or related to a previous Vongola boss. He had sent Reborn to Japan immediately, telling Hi-M to try and train Natsumi into a proper mafia boss, but had received a letter not soon after he arrived. Natsumi possessed not the Vongola sky flames, but rather lighting flames. This was of course, unprecedented. And he didn't think anyone had been expecting this to happen to the only remaining heir. If Natsumi didn't have sky flames, then the sky Vongola ring would never work for him. He was no longer a possible successor. And this brought him to the cause of his predicament. Tsunayoshi Sawada, the youngest son and only remaining descendant eligible to become Vongola Decimo. He had called for a private meeting with Imitsu concerning this. He just hoped he didn't have to force his hand on one of his most loyal subordinates. Imitsu Sawada wasn't having a good day. First, he'd woken up and noticed that his alarm had failed to wake him up, so he was late for an important meeting. Then, he'd arrived to his office only to find the usual amount of paperwork had tripled somehow in the time he'd been away. And finally, his coffee was cold, so it was understandable that when he received the summons of Nono, he wasn't the most gracious to the messenger. Let's just say that the poor man had to go to the hospital and get stitches done. Imitsu worked as the external advisor to the Vongola, and he was head of CEDEF. He had a family in Japan, but despite loving them very much, he seemed to forget about them once he was at work, only visiting once every 4 months or more. I wonder if this has anything to do with Natsumi. As far as Imitsu knew, Natsumi was the perfect son, a great leader in the making. He couldn't even imagine his poor little tuna as a mafia boss. He was too shy and weak. At least he has that friend of his, Hibari, wasn't it? Yes, at least he has someone else to protect him. Soon he reached Timoteo's office and knocked. Come in. As soon as he went inside and noticed the look on Nano's face, he knew this was serious. Ah, Imitsu, I'm glad you're finally here. We have some grave matters to discuss. Imitsu sat down. Does this have anything to do with Natsumi? I assure you no, he's a perfect candidate for the job, I'm sure. If Reborn? Imitsu. He was startled. Nono didn't seem to be in the best of moods, maybe his rambling hadn't helped. He sat, silently acknowledging that Nono was speaking. Imitsu, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to break our agreement regarding Tsunayoshi knowing about the mafia. Imitsu let the sentence sink in until, what? No. We agreed that as long as Natsumi got training as the future Vongola Decimo, you'd all allow me to keep Tsuna out of this business. Nono just gave him a grave look. Natsumi can't be Vongola Decimo. He doesn't have a sky flame. What do you mean he doesn't have a sky flame? Of course he does. He's a descendant of Primo. Imitsu was incredulous. How was it possible that Natsumi didn't possess the sky flames? They were hereditary. He'd never heard of this happening before. Perhaps Reborn got it wrong. Maybe his flames just aren't ready to come out. Timoteo just sighed. He possesses lightning flames. Reborn shot him with a dying will bullet a few days ago. Imitsu slouched, defeated. What do we do now? You have no other heirs. Nono just pointedly stared at him. Oh no. I will not let you drag my poor Tsuna into the mafia underworld. He'll be eaten alive. That's not what Reborn seems to think. Nono interrupted. In his letter he explained that Tsunayoshi didn't seem half as surprised as his brother when he was told about the mafia. Seemed to be resigned towards the information even. Are you sure you didn't let anything slip the last time you visited your family? Imitsu looked affronted. Of course not. I was very careful whenever I was on the phone with any of my subordinates. I was even speaking in Italian. Nono let it go after that. Nevertheless, Reborn wrote that he'll be having a chat with your son, just to be on the safe side. He looked at the slightly annoyed Imitsu apologetically. Regardless of your wishes, Tsunayoshi must be trained to succeed me. Vongola cannot lie unclaimed for very long, and he is the only one that's left. When he saw Imitsu open his mouth, he cut in quickly. And, I've already sent Reborn his new orders, to train Tsunayoshi Sawada to the best of his abilities so he'll become a good mafia boss. This meeting was just for me to relay the news to you. You have no say in any further things regarding your son. I'm sorry, Imitsu. All he could do was nod, and as he walked away, he wondered his poor family would soon be torn apart by the bloodthirsty life that comes with being a member of the mafia. It was 9 o'clock at night, and Suna was currently having a staring contest with Reborn. I can't believe this is happening to me. What do I do? The moment he'd gotten home at around 7, all because of evil paperwork, he'd noticed the archipelago staring at him while he ate his meal. After he'd finished, the baby had followed him into his room, where he'd been ignored while Suna worked on his homework, making sure he got around 40% on the assignment. Reborn had been living with his family for a day, and something seemed to have troubled the small hitman. He seemed as if he was waiting for something. He'd finished a few minutes ago, and ever since then, Reborn was just watching him. Getting tired the staring, he snapped. Is there something you want? Instantly he regretted his actions. You idiot, you're supposed to be shy, not snap at the world's strongest hitman. Now he'll know for sure that you're hiding something. Reborn seemed to have noticed his change in tone from the previous day and smirked. So he is hiding something. Dame Suna, I want to know what you know of the mafia. How did you find out? Oh shit, I guess the cat's out of the bag, but what excuse to use? Suddenly he remembered the assassin from all those years ago. You do. NT think I would have noticed something was fishy when I was attacked by no less than 12 assassins in the past several years. Especially given the fact that they kept mentioning my father as the head of CEDEF. That I wouldn't know of Vongola. Reborn was cursing Imitsu. Damn it, you idiot. Didn't you send any bodyguards to look after your family while you were in Italy? How did you survive the assassins? If what you're telling me is the truth, then you were only a child then. He smiled bitterly. At first, it was mostly luck. To be honest, I could have died dozens of times, but I've been training. Imitsu sure as hell hasn't been looking after his family. Hibari has been helping me for the last 4 years or so, getting rid of any evidence left by assassins. Reborn was surprised. Nothing could have possibly indicated that all of this had been going on. As far as he knew, Nana and Natsumi had lived their lives unknowing of all the dangers around them. It seems there's more going on in this small town than I was led to believe. That still doesn't explain how you know of CEDEF or Vongola. Suna smiled. I'm a hacker. Once I began to get curious about all the assassins. And you can't fault me for that because, honestly, I just wanted to know why the hell I was being targeted by people who seemed to belong to the mafia. I managed to get my hands on some low priority, not that well-guarded files where I managed to find out that the Vongola was a mafia familia, and that my father was a part of it. To be honest with you, I'd been suspicious of Imitsu for years, so it wasn't such a surprise. Reborn quickly went through the conversation in his head. So he knows about Vongola and managed to keep it a secret. Perhaps he even knew about the possibility of his brother becoming Vongola Decimo. But why keep it a secret? Seeing the look on Reborn's face, Suna smiled and quickly added. Don't worry about me spilling the beans. I know about Omerta. It's not like I know any important secrets of the Vongola. At least not any recent ones. He mentally added. Reborn looked satisfied, and spoke again. Do you know anything about dying will flames? Only a little. I heard that the Vongola boss as well as their guardians all have a specific flame. Did you know you and your brother are the only remaining heirs to the title of Vongola Decimo? Suna looked slightly surprised. I thought only Natsumi was considered as an heir. Reborn turned serious. That was before the events of yesterday took place. What do you mean? I have a bad feeling about this. Your brother doesn't have a sky flame. He has lightning flames. As of right now, you are the only candidate available to become Vongola Decimo. You are the only candidate available, only candidate. The words kept repeating themselves in his head. He had promised himself that he wouldn't join a mafia familia again, not after the problems with his once friend and guardian, Demon Spade. Even if it is Vongola. It's changed a lot since the days when I was in charge. Am I really ready for this? It's not like I have much of a choice. But, if I want to protect my friends and family, I have to be strong. And perhaps I can change the Vongola to what it once was. I'll do this, for my family. I accept the position of future Vongola Decimo. They both looked at each other, a silent, unspoken promise made to themselves. Reborn promised himself to find out Tsuna's secrets, while Tsuna promised himself he'd take his secrets to the grave, no matter how short a time that might end up being. I just got the letter from Nono today. Starting from now on, I'll be your tutor in all subjects, both academics and athletics. I'll make an assessment of your fighting skills tomorrow, preferably you against that friend of yours. Hibari was it. Oh hell, I can't believe the things that happened to me. I really am a trouble magnet, aren't I? Tsuna despaired. After they finished their conversation, Reborn decided he wanted to sleep on Tsuna's bed. What do you mean you're sleeping on my bed? And what's with all these grenades? Regardless to say, Tsuna ended up sleeping on the couch in the living room. He knew that Reborn was still suspicious of him. Something still doesn't seem right. What are you hiding, Tsunayoshi? I have a feeling all those answers weren't fully truthful, but why not answer truthfully? Unless it's something else you're hiding, perhaps even something to do with the mafia. I'll have to keep an eye on my new student. The baby soon fell asleep, his eyes wide open, the ONLY sign of his sleeping state being the bubble blowing out of his nose as he breathed. Later that night, Tsuna woke up, slightly disoriented, until he remembered that Reborn had taken his room, so he looked around. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. Strange, I'm usually a heavy sleeper. I wonder what could have woken me up. The room was dark, light coming in through the window, creating eerie shadows across the room. He noticed something on the small coffee table beside the couch, a small box. Underneath the box was a note. Strange, I don't remember seeing that there when I went to sleep. Quickly unfolding it, he read its contents. Dear Jodo-kun, I'm so happy you're back, our game can finally begin. The stage is set, it's your move. P.S. You might want to keep an eye on the contents of this box. Who knows what might happen to it in the wrong hands. A friend. Tsuna was panicking. How could anyone have found out about his previous life as Jodo? He had shown no signs of being anything but ordinary for years, unless he was dealing with someone new, yet he thought the message seemed familiar. After all, there had only been one man in his entire life to have ever called him that. They had last met each other 400 years before, when he had accepted the Vongola rings. To this day, he still remembered the man's mysterious personality and all the hints he kept dropping, slightly alluding that he knew his greatest secret. How could he possibly still be alive? Unless he was an immortal. In which case, everything had just gotten even more complicated. He opened the box and looked at its contents. No, it can't be. I thought it was gone forever. He was shocked. Inside the box was a ring. A ring he hasn't seen in over 700 years. He could already recognize the crack caused by Gryffindor's sword in the stone, ruining the once prominent symbol that was once etched there. Sitting in the box, almost as if it was mocking him just by its mere presence alone, was the resurrection stone. Demands and answered all his questions. Well, him having once been the head of a mafia familia, he knew what would happen with a family without an heir, and seeing how Natsumi was revealed to not have a sky flame, he knew it was his job to take over. Since he only acted clumsy and shy because he didn't want the Maria's attention which he now has, he'll street art acting more like himself around others. As for answering Reborn's questions, his answers were half-truths at best, so he's still keeping his secrets, something he plans to keep doing until he dies. Too bad he won't be able to keep them for long. In case you're wondering about Natsumi, I never really planned for him to be a main character. He'll be sort of like Nana, seen a few times every few chapter or so. But not overly important to the storyline. Not saying that Nana's not important, because seriously, she's Nana, Nuff said. If people really want him in the storyline, he might join the CEDEF or something. And his relationship with Tsuna will only get better from here. Those of you that like Lambo, don't worry. He'll still be the lightning guardian. Me adding the resurrection stone is actually important to the story. But you might not find out why until much later on, maybe after the end of the future arc. If any of you spot anything that doesn't make sense, don't be afraid to point it out, I don't mind. Semicolon closing parenthesis. Once again thanks for all the reviews, favorites, follows. Don't forget to review. I might be persuaded to update faster if you do. Chapter 7. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 7. It was another day at Namimori Middle. The birds were chirping, the teachers were teaching, Hibari was drinking coffee in his office, and Tsuna was dodging bullets. Wait, bullets. Ah, Reborn. Stop shooting at me, I'm late for school. The sadistic hitman's only response was to pull out another gun and continue shooting. Dame Tsuna, get to school with your dying will. Brunette's only option was to jump again, barely dodging the shower of bullets raining down on him. Mirda, Reborn thought, how is he dodging all my bullets? I need to see his flames for myself. After the great disappointment his brother was, it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't have sky flames as well. Of course, he was only telling himself that as an excuse. The real reason was that he was irritated at the brunette's secrets. And an irritated Reborn made for a trigger-happy baby hitman. Today was officially his first day as Tsuna's tutor, and already he was frustrated with his student. Earlier that morning he'd told Natsumi about his change of student and the boy had seemed relieved, being sympathetic enough to give his younger brother a pitying look. I only had him as my tutor foe. Less than a day and faced humiliation at school, who knows what else he might have done. Natsumi had not for the first time felt pity to his clumsy brother. With his luck, he'd never survive to talk over that mafia family Reborn talked about. Neither he nor Reborn knew that in the following weeks Dame Tsuna would become a person of the past, Tsuna beginning to act more mature and intelligent, and that finally people would figure out just why Hibari remained friends with the fluffy-haired brunette. Keep running, Dame Tsuna. While Tsuna was running from Reborn, he didn't notice that he'd head someone in his haste to get away from the psychotic baby. Eventually the only thing a curious passerby could see was the trail of smoke as Tsuna and Reborn ran towards the school. While Tsuna and Reborn ran past him, Sasagawa Ryohei looked at the running brunette and shouted, "Extreme! Look how extremely fast that kid is running. I'll find him and extremely suggest he join the boxing club." Hibari was angry. His morning had been going just fine, with no herbivores crowding his way and his coffee waiting on his desk. Then he'd overheard two of the teachers commenting on how Tsunayoshi had been more than 1 hour late to his class and his mood had worsened. "I can tolerate the omnivore being late, but not this late. I'll bite him to death." Hibari always became angry at the omnivore for his herbivorous act, and decided to finally put his foot down and encourage he start coming to school on time and start acting like his true self. He was tired of walking around and hearing the our students mock him as if they were his betters, when no one else but him and Kusakabe knew the truth. While Hibari was fuming, Tsuna was hiding up on the roof, hoping Reborn wouldn't find him. Even if he was a much better fighter than he appeared, he still didn't appreciate having to dodge bullets, especially coming from his new sadistic tutor. At least I have been getting better, Tsuna thought. My reflexes have improved a lot thanks to that baby. He stopped suddenly, hearing the door to the roof opening. He turned around, hoping it wasn't Reborn, and he got his wish. Oh, it seems the roof wasn't as empty as I thought. Hey, what are you doing up here alone? Tsuna immediately noticed that the one standing on the roof with him was Yamamoto Takeshi, star of the baseball team and one of the school idols. Why is he up here? Escaping from fangirls perhaps? Tsuna just smiled back and said, "Hello Yamamoto-san. I was just up here because I like to watch the clouds, what about you?" Yamamoto seemed surprised to see Dame Tsuna, not that he calls him that, but his other classmates do talk so well. Usually the boy stuttered while around others. I was running away from girls. They said they wanted to eat with me. But I didn't want to. He said this with a smile on his face. Suna's sweat dropped. I knew it. Fangirls. They're all the same, no matter what universe you're in. Yamamoto was thinking about the brunette, and how even though they went to the same school they never talked, the only person Suna seemed to hold conversations with was Hibari-san. He decided GHT then and there that he'd befriend the quiet brunette, partly because he was curious about Suna, and also because he'd noticed that Suna seemed lonely, more lonely than anyone he'd ever met. Wonder if that's why he's friends with Hibari-san. Perhaps he recognized that he was lonely as well. Yamamoto Takeshi was far more perceptive than he let on, often playing the part of an always smiling, always happy person. While on the inside he always felt as if he was alone, the only reason so many people hung around him being his skills at baseball or his happy act. Lonely people should be friends. That way they're not so lonely anymore. Suna was surprised. Yamamoto had just asked if it was okay for him to stay and eat with him. Why would Yamamoto, one of the school's idols, want to spend his lunch with me? The supposed Dame Suna. Nevertheless, he smiled, happy that someone apart from Hibari wanted to spend time with him at school, and answered. Of course, it's fine Yamamoto-san, I don't mind at all. Suddenly Yamamoto grew serious and said, call me Takeshi. Being called Yamamoto-san makes me think of my father. Suna smiled. Then call me Suna. They spent the rest of their lunch break talking about different things and looking up at the clouds. Both Suna and Takeshi were pleasantly surprised with each other, promising to meet again on the rooftop the next day. Suna was lazily doodling on his notebook, ignoring the teacher as he taught them math. God, all this going to school gets boring so fast. I can't even remember the number of times I've had to go through this same lesson in different times. I could even teach this class better than the teacher himself. The door to the classroom opened and Kusakabe-san poked his head inside. Sorry to interrupt, but Hibari-sama is looking for Sawada Tsunayoshi. The teacher looked irritated. Sawada, I know you weren't paying attention to this lesson anyways, but know that there'll be a test on this tomorrow. Now leave. Groans could be heard throughout the classroom as the other students suddenly found out they had a test the following day, but soon everyone forgot about it and began to discuss why Dame Suna was being called to the head of the disciplinary committee. As Suna and Kusakabe walked away, they could hear the teacher trying to get quiet in the class. Suna turned towards the disciplinary committee member and asked, why does Kiyoya-san need me? Kusakabe was the only one apart from Hibari that knew about Suna's true personality, often joining him and Hibari at his house on the few occasions that he managed to drag Hibari with him. He smiled. I believe it has to do with your tardiness this morning. It seems you were more than an hour late. An impressive feat, even for you, I must say. Not for the first time Suna cursed Reborn. It's all the Archibaldino's fault. When I get home I'll put salt in his coffee. The rest of the journey was quiet, each of the two students thinking about different things. Enter. Suna walked into Hibari's office. As head of the disciplinary committee, Hibari owned a medium-sized office in the left wing of the school. There was a desk in the far right corner, along with a filing cabinet and a bookcase. There was a couch on one side of the room, often used by Hibari when he took his afternoon naps. At the moment Hibari was sitting on his desk, writing something down on a sheet of paper. Kusakabe just let Suna in and closed the door. When Hibari looked up, his face suddenly took on a scary expression. Omnivore, would you be kind enough to tell me why you were so late today? Suna just smiled weakly. A baby hitman was shooting bullets at me this morning. Hibari just looked at him again. Explain. And explain he did. While he'd indeed told Reborn that he wouldn't speak of any Vongola secrets with anyone else, Hibari had some ties to the mafia from one of his uncles, Fawn, who happened to be one of the legendary Archibaldino, the Storm Archibaldino. Hibari had already been aware of Suna's ties to Vongola due to his help with the various assassins over the years, so Suna explained about Reborn's arrival, and how now that Natsumi was unable to take over as Vongola Decimo, he was the only candidate left. Hibari was quiet throughout the explanation, and stayed quiet as he processed the new information. That is still not an excuse to your tardiness. Today after school, you will be bitten to death. Don't be late. Suna just sighed, knowing that once Hibari made up his mind it was almost impossible to change it. I'll be there, Kiyoya. After Suna had left, Hibari smirked. He couldn't wait for the fight. It was the afternoon and school had finally ended. After the students and left, the only ones left were Hibari and Suna. But each of them were aware of the small baby holding his binoculars watching them start to fight. Suna was too occupied to get annoyed with the baby, or he would have realized that him being late had been his plan all along in order for him to fight Kiyoya. Spin, kick, block. Both of them were fighting, going full out, Hibari using his tonfas and Suna carefully using his flames, something that shocked Reborn. He's using his dying will flames without the help of the bullet. It should have been impossible, unless he had a very strong will, to be able to use his flames so well. One more mystery to add to his already huge list. When I asked if he knew about dying will flames, he told me he knew a few things about them, but by the way that he uses his own flames, he probably knows far more than he let on. As he saw the fight end, he decided to send the video of the fight to Hayato Gokudera, also known as Smoke and Bomb Hayato, along with a letter inviting him to Japan to test the Vongola Decimo, with a bit of embellishment of course. Perhaps he'd tell him that the winner would take over as Vongola Decimo, that'd be sure to get the mafioso's attention. He walked away, following Suna and Hibari to the Sawada's home. Ka-san, I'm home. Suna and Hibari walked inside while Reborn jumped in through a window. Nana Sawada came out of the kitchen and smiled at the three of them. Oh look, you brought Hibari-kun as well. How lucky that your brother decided to stay at a friend's house, we have enough food for everyone. Suna smiled at his mother and walked into the dining room, along with a quietly sulking Skylark because of Nana's nickname. For the past 3 or so years, it had become a habit for Suna to drag him to his house after a particularly tiring fight, exclaiming how he didn't trust that Hibari would eat enough to replenish his energy, a valid concern. Of course, at first Hibari had been against it wholeheartedly, but he'd grown fond of the omnivore's mother, and enjoyed her cooking as well. Nowadays, while he still pretended as if he didn't want to be there, everyone knew he enjoyed spending time with the small family. Once they were all seated, Nana placed the food in front of them. Enjoy. They all thanked her and began to eat her delicious food. Reborn seemed to be contemplating something as he stared at Hibari until the meal was over. Hibari stared back, not feeling amused at the baby's stare. What do you want from me, baby? Would you like to join Suna's family? Suna couldn't believe what he was hearing. He'd known it was coming, yet he'd allowed high himself to think that perhaps Hibari wouldn't get recruited, a foolish hope it seemed. Hibari seemed to think about it. Will I get to fight stronger herbivores? Reborn smirked from under his fedora. Of course. Then I accept. Suna opened his mouth to argue, but Hibari sent him a glare and continued. Not only that, but the omnivore is my friend, and I'm the only one allowed to bite him to death. Suna was overjoyed to finally hear Kiyoya himself admit that they were friends, and he knew that the previous sentence spoken by the Skylark of Namimori was probably as close as he would get to mentioning him as a friend ever again. But he was just happy that Kiyoya would join his familia, and that no matter what would happen from now on, his best friend would be by his side. Reborn looked satisfied with himself as he welcomed Hibari to the Vongola. Welcome Hibari Kiyoya, Cloud Guardian to the Vongola familia. I loved writing the scene at the end. I wasn't sure if Hibari might have been a bit OOC or not, but hey. This will eventually become O, so I think it's fine. Next chapter will introduce Gokudera Hayato. And there'll be some more Yamamoto, Suna interaction. Some of you were asking about a pairing. And at the moment I'm going to have to say that there probably won't be a pairing. I'm not very comfortable writing romance, but perhaps later on I'll do something, who knows. But just so you know, if there's any romance it'll be a background thing and it won't dominate the story's plot. I seriously can't wait for the Kokuyo arc. I'm really looking forward to writing Rokudo Mukuro. The next chapter might be a little later than usual, so you might only get one chapter next week. I'm not sure if I got any names wrong, but if I did, please point it out in a review. I'll see you next time. And don't forget to review Chapter 8. I thank those of you who reviewed me, but I was really disappointed with the number of reviews for the last chapter. Come on people, there's over 300 follows to this story. I'm sure most of you have the time to at least write a short review. Sorry for the rant, and moving on. Anyway, in this chapter I wrote a bit of Gokudera's POV, J. So you could get a feel as to what he was thinking when he arrived at Namimori. I hope to change some things next chapter, go a bit into territory. No Hibari in this chapter though, he'll be back in the next one. Here's the next chapter. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 8. Flight 289 to Namimori, Japan will be landing in 15 minutes, we hope you enjoyed your flight. Hayato Gokudera. I was sitting down in a first-class seat, thinking about the events which had eventually led to him landing in such a small town in Japan. If what that Reborn said was true, then the future boss of Vongola is some pathetic kid that has no mafia training at all. I must challenge him and win. Ever since he was young, he had worked hard for recognition, always trying to impress a father that didn't really appreciate him except for the few times he played the piano for his friends at their fancy dinner parties. His sister always got more attention, more respect from their associates. And now, here he was after hearing from one of the Archibaleno no less, that the future candidate of the Vongola was indecisive about his future as boss, and that if he beat him he'd be able to take over the most powerful mafia familias in the world. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, a small voice in his head told him. Gokudera ignored the voice and walked out of the plane. The airport was fairly big considering the town's small size. He looked around at the airport, seeing all the happy families and friends reuniting and walking away together. He just continued walking. No one was here for him. He got his bags and called a taxi to take him to his hotel. As he watched the landscape of Namimori speed by through the window, he couldn't believe that the future boss of a mafia family came from such a small and happy-looking place. How could anyone living here possibly know anything about the mafia? He'll get himself killed. I'm doing him a favor by defeating him. He paid the taxi driver and walked into the hotel. Because of his job as an assassin, he had been able to pay for a room in the most expensive hotel in all of Namimori. The inside was impressive. There was a chandelier dangling from above, and expensive-looking furniture was tastefully placed around the main lobby. When he approached the man at the front desk, he took one look at Gokudera and sneered. The teen in front of him looked like he was some kind of street urchin. What if some guests saw him there? The hotel's prestige would decrease. What are you doing here, kid? Are you lost? This hotel is for those with money, not street punks like you, so scram. Quote. Gokudera was fuming. How dare that man treat him like that? He hasn't even introduced himself. If he knew he was talking to a member of the Italian mafia, he wouldn't act so high and mighty. He gave the idiot a frosty glare and answered the man currently looking down at him as if he were his better. My name is Gokudera Hayato. I believe I have a room waiting for me. The man stopped sneering with superiority and tried to salvage the situation by endlessly apologizing as he handed him the key to his room. Gokudera just took the keys and left, satisfied that the man wouldn't be there the next morning. Hey, there are perks to being a mafioso. Tsuna opened his eyes. He looked around to see what had woken him and immediately noticed that Reborn was right on top of him, holding his Leon hammer. He looked at the startled baby and raised an eyebrow. I hope you weren't planning on hitting me with that hammer, Reborn. The baby looked disgruntled. It's a Vongola family tradition. Tsuna knew he was lying, but let it go. He wasn't supposed to know about that kind of thing, being new to the Vongola and all. Trying to act like it's all new to me will get old fast. I'll be lucky if I last the next 6 months. Looking back at the baby, he calmly picked him up and dropped him on his desk. I guess I better get ready for school then. Reborn wasn't sure of what to think. This new student of his was different to any student he'd ever had before, and he was finding himself acting much more comfortably with him than with any other student he'd ever had. It seemed like the sun felt comfortable and welcome with this sky. Tsuna seemed like a very mature person underneath the whole clumsy act he had yet to get rid of completely. The boy had adapted to Reborn's way of teaching in just under 3 days, and while at first this had irritated the baby, he was really appreciating the fact that one of his students actually wanted to be taught and listened to his instructions without question. So far everything had been going very well, yet he had yet to shoot any of his special bullets at Tsuna. He was beginning to feel like he didn't really need to. What with Suna already being able to access them without his help, something that had shocked Nono and Imitsu once he sent his weekly report. Suna had really surprised him with his fighting abilities, especially due to the almost daily spars he got into with Hibari. His fighting style seemed very well developed and the fights really showed that he had experience. There were still too many mysteries surrounding his student though, especially when that strange ring had appeared on his middle finger a few days after his arrival. His student had refused to answer his questions and only told him that it was a gift from a friend with an almost bitter tone of voice, and he'd left it at that. Yet today would be the day of his student's first test. To defeat Smoke and Bomb Hayato and convince him to join his family as his storm guardian. He'd received news of his arrival last night and knew that he'd been transferred to Suna's school and attend today. Hopefully he wasn't wrong about his student. I hope you make me proud, Dame Suna. Suna was looking out the window when he saw someone approaching his desk. It was Yamamoto. He smiled at his new friend and asked him what he was up to. Oh, well, today I woke up late because my clock was broken, so I had to run all the way here and crossed paths with this other student from our school, Sasagawa Ryohei. He seemed very enthusiastic about joining me on my run, and he even invited me to the boxing club. I told him I was already in the baseball team, but invited him to eat lunch with us on the roof. I hope that's okay. Suna was flabbergasted. Yamamoto sure was cheery around people. Then he registered what Yamamoto had said. Blinking, he replied, "Oh sure. The more the merrier. I just hope Hibari doesn't find out. He wouldn't appreciate the crowding." They continued speaking for a few more minutes, oblivious to the whispering of the other students wondering why such a popular guy as Yamamoto was talking to Dame Suna. "All right, quiet down students." The teacher had walked in. "We have a new student joining us today from Italy. His name is Gokudera Hayato." Suddenly the door burst open and a tall male with silver hair and wearing an unorthodox version of the school uniform, something Suna was sure Hibari wouldn't appreciate, walked in, wearing a dark expression. Good lord, he could already hear the girls talking about how cool and mysterious he looked. And they were even starting a fan club. Of course, he already knew who the transfer student was, having gotten the info through one of his informants a few days ago. Reborn probably brought him all the way from Italy just to test me. At least this shows that he's taking this job seriously. He was snapped out of his thoughts when his desk was suddenly tossed aside as the transfer student almost shoved him out of his chair. Why is he so hostile? I bet Reborn had something to do with this. He spent the rest of class getting dirty looks from the mafioso. The lunch bell rang, and many of the students ran outside to have lunch with their friends. Suna and Yamamoto headed to the roof, finding someone else that was already there. Extreme. It's that guy from a few days ago. You must extremely join the boxing club. Suna's first impression of Sasagawa Ryohei was of a very hyper-looking guy radiating with sun flames. Is this guy for real? It else as if he's continuously using his dying will flames. And, my eyes. Sasagawa Ryohei was certainly interesting. Suna answered, "I'm sorry Sasagawa-senpai. I'm too busy with my schoolwork and helping Hibari-san. I don't think I'd have time for the boxing club." Ryohei looked disappointed but then brightened again. "Wait, so you work with Hibari? That's great. Please tell him to fight me." Suna was surprised. Sasagawa-san, do you know what you're asking for? Hibari-san isn't known for being the best person to fight. The other brightened and cut in. "I extremely know what I want, Suna. And I want to fight Hibari. And maybe even invite him to the boxing club." Both him and Yamamoto, who had until now remained quietly amused in the background, sighed in exasperation. "He's delusional." Suna assured him he'd pass along the message to Hibari and they all got their lunches and ate. Suna looked around, smiling at his new friends. No one noticed the small baby watching from a nearby building. "It seems like you found your sun and rain guardians. Good job, Suna." Suna was walking home when someone crossed into his path. Hayato Gokudera looked at the boy who was supposedly the Vongola Decimo. Pathetic, he thought with disgust. "So you're the supposed future Vongola Decimo. I refuse to accept you as him." Suna just looked at him with a bored face. Gokudera just got even more enraged from the indifference on the other boy's face. Reborn suddenly popped from out of nowhere and turned towards Gokudera. Gokudera Hayato, you came earlier than expected. Suna turned to Reborn, not even bothering to ask about the other mafioso. Reborn turned towards Suna with an exasperated face. You knew he was coming, didn't you? Suna gave a smile. Yup. Looking towards Hayato, the baby told him, fight him. You want to become Vongola Decimo, don't you? He jumped away and Gokudera took out 2 sticks of dynamite. Quickly lighting them, he threw them towards Suna. Suna immediately activated his flames and used them to defuse them, which only made Gokudera even more angry. He took out double the amount of dynamite and lit them up. Double bomb. Suna once again defused them. In the background, Reborn had sat down on a windowsill quietly and calmly sipping his espresso. Gokudera took out a ridiculous amount of dynamite, how does he even fit the in his pockets? And lit them up. Then, one of the dynamite sticks fell on the ground, and the mafioso looked down, knowing he wouldn't be able to get it in time. I guess this is it, the end. How ironic that my own chosen weapon would be my demise. Suna also saw the dynamite and immediately dove forward and defused it. As Suna tried to steady his breathing, he saw that Gokudera Hayato had knelt down on the ground facing him. I'm so sorry, Judaime. I was mistaken, you are the rightful heir. Suna looked down at him, uncomprehending as to how someone who'd just tried to kill him could have changed so quickly. Command me to do anything. I'll follow you with my life. Suna looked uncomfortable. Gokudera-san, it was no problem, you don't have to kneel. The other looked up at him with adoration in his eyes. But Judaime, you saved my life. I didn't really want the position of Vongola 10th anyway, I only wanted to test your strength. Please allow me to become your right-hand man. Suna could only nod, and smile as he was reminded of his previous right-hand man, G. I see a lot of him in you, Gokudera Hayato. I'm sure we'll become the best of friends. Reborn looked at them and felt satisfied. Storm Guardian acquired. Omake. Because one of you asked, and after I thought about it, this popped up. Reborn was tired, he'd just woken up and he needed his morning espresso. It was 5 in the morning and he needed to look as disgustingly awake as he could when he went to wake Suna. Walking out of the room after quietly getting changed, he walked downstairs towards the kitchen after making sure he was the only one in the house who was actually awake. Yawning, he opened the cupboard and got his mug, and walked over to the coffee machine. Ah, heavenly coffee, the drink of the gods, he thought as he added a teaspoon of sugar to his cup. He savored the smell of his espresso, and took a huge gulp. Not soon after he spat it out. My coffee, it's salty. Quickly he looked at the jar of sugar and saw that someone had switched all the sugar for salt, and he had a pretty good idea as to who had done it. Dame Suna, you've crossed a line when you messed with my coffee. Stewing in anger, he smirked as he imagined all the ways to torture his troublesome student for his prank. I'll teach him to mess with my coffee. While Suna was sleeping, he suddenly felt a chill go through him and pulled the blanket closer to himself. It seemed as if his special intuition worked even while he was asleep. What did you think? I hope you enjoyed this newest chapter, and the omake. This is my first time writing one, so I wasn't sure if it was done well. I know that a lot of the whole Gokudera Suna battle was the same as in canon, and this was mostly because I wasn't able to think of any other situation where Gokudera would have become as devoted to Suna, because let's face it, the scene with Suna saving Gokudera's life is one of the things I wouldn't even consider changing from canon. As for any of you wondering about the whole Yamamoto or Ryohei scenes with them joining Suna's family and if they are going to happen like the manga or the anime, the answer is that they won't happen that at all. Yes, you read correctly. Starting from next chapter this story will get slightly and hopefully continue heading into the mysterious and wonderful world of alternate possibilities. Don't worry, Yamamoto and Ryohei will still become guardians. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to go through most of the arcs, especially the important ones, but they'll be different to canon. I hope you read my mini rant at the beginning of the chapter, and understood my message. Review people, Chapter 9, small omake that follows from the previous one. I hope you enjoy it. This chapter is quite a bit longer than the previous one, and there are some things that happen which are completely so watch out. If any of you have questions about this chapter, Please read my ridiculously long AN at the bottom. And if you have more questions, just send me a PM or review, and I'll do my best to answer them as long as they're not about future chapters. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere. But I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 9. Tsunayoshi Sawada was walking home after an uneventful day at school with his friend Yamamoto Takeshi. Gokudera had wanted to come, but he'd forgotten that he had to go grocery shopping. He lived alone after all. His friend turned to him with a smile. So what are you doing this afternoon? Do you have any plans? Tsuna had finished his homework already, so he said he wasn't really doing anything. Why don't you come over to my dad's sushi shop? You guys still haven't met. Tsuna replied, sure. As they turned around to head towards Take Sushi, Tsuna noticed that the street they were walking in was empty. He looked around silently. I don't have a good feeling about this. Usually this street is pretty busy at this time. Yamamoto seemed to be thinking the same thing. Hey Tsuna, isn't this street strangely empty today? He laughed nervously. Tsuna tried to smile back, but it came out kind of shaky. I'm sure people are just in their homes or something. This isn't good, Tsuna thought. If something happens right now, I'll have to tell Yamamoto about the whole mafia situation. I don't want him to know about this, he's just a normal guy. Yamamoto looked as if he wanted to say something reassuring as well. But suddenly they found themselves surrounded by a circle of people wearing theater comedy and tragedy masks and long black cloaks. While Yamamoto looked around warily, knowing that something strange was going on. Tsuna was panicking. The masks, they look so familiar. Suddenly, a memory was remembered, after so many years. Harry was in a forest, yelling at himself for acting so foolishly. You idiot, how could you have let your guard down so easily? It had only been 5 months since Voldemort's demise and he had been walking through Diagon Alley looking for the perfect gift for his godson Teddy Lupin. When suddenly he'd felt the familiar rush of a portkey as something was thrown at him. Quickly taking note of his surroundings, it became quite obvious that he was in a forest. And the point me spell he'd attempted had failed, which meant that there were wards around. Shit, why am I even here? He looked around frantically, searching for any sign of anything he recognized but found nothing. Nothing but trees as far as he could see. A few seconds later he heard the familiar crack of apparition and found himself surrounded by an army of people in cloaks wearing theater masks. And there was one man standing in front of the others, clearly their leader. The man spoke. Harry Potter, the man who conquered, or so I've heard recently. The amusement in the other's voice was easy to hear. And loath as he was to admit it, it brought down Harry's guard, if only a minuscule amount. Yeah, well, the Daily Prophet isn't really well known for their creativity, are they? He replied. No, they are not, the man replied. The other man suddenly tensed, as if remembering the real reason for their current encounter. Indeed, now that pleasantries are over, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Ask away. Harry could feel the other's excitement as the man asked eagerly. I recently heard that you were in possession of 3 items, the Deathly Hallows I believe you call them. Oh, so apparently he was one of those people, those that believed in the power of the Hallows to allow their master to overcome death itself. He had no idea what had happened or who had told. But a few days after the Battle of Hogwarts, news had gone out about him being the master of the Deathly Hallows. Some had just written it of as another great thing about their so-called savior, while others had grown greedy. And tried to challenge him or even kill him for the items. So far, he'd been lucky, and none of the situations had been very serious. Harry was careful as he answered, well aware that there were some very fanatical believers out there, and that this cloaked stranger could prove to be one of the worst. Well, I was in possession of those items for a short amount of time, but they are no longer with me. Quote, lie. Well, a half-lie. He had parted with both the stone and the wand, choosing to part with them while he still didn't feel tempted to use their power. The fair man suddenly gave off an air of resignation. Well then, I guess it can't be helped. He turned towards his other companions. Kill him. The moment the man uttered those words, Harry knew he was screwed. He'd have to fight his way out. The others stepped forward and pulled out their wands and Harry did the same. Expelliarmus, Protega, Lumos Maxima, Bombarda, Sectum Sempra, and an overwhelming amount of Avada Kedavras met his ears as he dropped and rolled while shouting out the name of every combat spell he knew, which admittedly was a fairly large amount. Many days later as he as questioned about the fight and the events that followed, he would admit that he didn't know how he managed to make it out of there alive. In a moment of desperation he remembered that fateful day in the graveyard and his way of escape. It wouldn't hurt to try, he thought as he used his last spell before falling unconscious. Accio Portki. Just before darkness entered his vision he felt a familiar object collide with his hand and he felt a pulling sensation. As the years had gone by and he'd discovered the true fate of the Master of Death, he'd completely forgotten about his meeting with the strange group, deeming it unimportant considering his newly found out reincarnation issues. How can they be here? I'm positive this isn't even the same reality. As far as I know there's no wizarding world here. Yamamoto turned to him. Suna. Before he could complete his sentence one of the men took out a gun. The other men also pulled out guns, and they all pointed them at Suna. The man, he remembered as their leader stepped in front of the others. So we meet again. Suna just had one question. How are you here? How did you find me? The man seemed to be hiding an infuriating smirk underneath the mask as he just replied with, magic. Nervously, aware that his friend was caught inside of the circle of men along with him, he asked why they'd come and what they wanted. What we want is easy, Master of Death. The man said mockingly, as if disgusted with Suna's status. We want your death. How very final those words seemed to be, portrayed without the slightest hesitation, as if walking up to a child and telling them they wished to kill them was something completely normal. Unfortunately, our powers don't seem to work very well in this universe, so we'll have to make do with these disgusting muggle contraptions. He heard a shot and turned towards his friend, noticing that the other was unconscious on the floor. What did you do? The others laughed. It was a chilling sound and the leader replied. Don't worry, it's just a sleeping drug, he'll be up and about in no time. Suna was beginning to think the man was bipolar. Why do you want the Hallows anyways? They bring nothing but pain to their master, and besides, I don't even have them anymore. The other man seemed to consider the pros and cons of answering the boy's question and decided that it didn't matter anyway. Harry Potter, you don't know how many years it took to find you, how much work and research went into finding out where you'd gone, and I did it all for the Hallows. I am their rightful owner. But the only way for them to truly belong to me is if their previous master dies, he replied with hysteria. For some reason these people knew who he was, even though he looked nothing like how he'd looked like as Harry Potter. Oh yeah, this man's a nutter. He continued, I know for a fact that you have the resurrection stone on your finger, I can feel its magic even from here. Oh shit, how am I going to get out of this one? I'm surrounded by psychotic maniacs. He mulled over his previous thoughts. Oh, who am I kidding? This is practically the story of my life. As he activated his flames, thinking that his day couldn't possibly get any worse, it did. Damn you, Murphy's Law. Reborn had arrived. Suna could sense him watching from a rooftop. What am I going to do now? He thought incredulously. His day had gotten worse. Reborn had been calmly reading a book in Suna's room when he realized how late it was. My foolish student would have called if he knew he'd be late, where is he? Suddenly getting a sense of foreboding, he left the house and began to search the town of Namimori. Flying on his Leon glider, he flew over the streets, finally finding his wayward student surrounded with suspicious people in cloaks, all holding guns. His Rain Guardian was unconscious at his feet while Suna and the group's leader stared at each other. As loath as he was to admit it, it seemed that they knew each other. Perhaps a previous assassination attempt. Feeling slightly guilty, he decided to watch from afar, hoping to find out more about his student, yet ready to act if things got out of hand. One of the people slightly in front of the others looked at his student and spoke. This is your last chance, Master of Death. If you give up now we'll kill you quickly, you can't use your powers here after all. Quote, Suna seemed to realize something and smirked. Can't use my powers, huh? Before the others could do anything, his student used his flames to jump over the heads of his assailants. The others seemed to startle. So they don't know about dying will flames, Reborn thought. but what's this, Master of Death, business, how do you know each other Suna? His student seemed to have more secrets than he thought. Damn it, why did these idiots have to call me that? Reborn's going to interrogate me after this, I just know it. Figuring that him responding "WOU" didn't make the situation any worse than it already was, he asked once again, how did you get here? The crazy leader finally told him. Our master helped us, we'd been looking for you for years, and suddenly there he was. Standing in front of me, and he offered to help, to take us to you so I could finally get what I wanted and my revenge for that humiliating day so many years before. Master, what did he look like? The man's fanatical tone of voice was heard once more. None of us know what he looks like, but he's powerful, more powerful than all of us. How were you able to use magic anyway? The man's tone was accusing. It wasn't magic, he replied truthfully. What do you mean it wasn't? It has to have been, but our master told us magic wasn't available here. Suna finally had enough. Why don't we stop with the pleasantries and get this over with? The man nodded. Agreed. Turning he yelled. Kill him. The other men pointed their guns towards Suna and began to fire. He was able to avoid the bullets easily. It seemed that the wizards had no experience of shooting weapons that weren't sticks of wood. Luckily, when he jumped over the others he'd led them away from Yamamoto so he didn't get killed. Suna, with the help of his flames jumped, dived, and danced away from the bullets gracefully, showing that all his lessons with Reborn hadn't been for nothing, actually helping him improve his movements. The men grew angry, and their shots became so sloppy that some even managed to shoot each other. Suna, while evading the bullets, spun and kicked the guns out of his opponent's hands. And took one of the guns. Silently wishing for a second that it wasn't necessary, he pointed it towards the others and shot. The sound of guns eventually stopped, and soon the only person left standing was Suna. With a group of people lying dead or unconscious at his feet. He took out a phone and pressed the speed dial for Hibari's number. His friend's apathetic tone was heard when he answered. What is it, Omnivore? I was sleeping. Suna just bluntly told him about his recent incident, confirming that some of the assailants were still alive. Hibari assured him that they'd soon be disposed of, and told him to leave the scene ASAP or he wouldn't like the consequences of being found covered in blood in the middle of such a scene. He agreed, knowing that the outcome of that would be awkward. Especially if his mother found out. Finally he said, Kiyoya, thank you. He noticed the Skylark's hesitation as he answered, You're welcome, Suna. Suna smiled, glad that his friend would always be there to help him out, no matter how uncaring he seemed. After ending the call, he noticed that Reborn's presence was gone, and his smile vanished. He knew that when he got home he would have much to answer for. And he wasn't looking forward to that. Noticing that Yamamoto was waking up, he activated his flames once more and took them away from the scene. Suna, what happened? He looked down at his friend, seeing the confusion and slight fear the previous events had caused. For a second, he considered telling him everything, the whole truth, but something inside him gave him the feeling that it was too soon, that he wouldn't take the truth very well. Ah, Yamamoto, those men that attacked us, it was a case of mistaken identity. Kiyoya came and took them away, but they shot a tranquilizer dart at you. Seeing the slight panic his words caused, he continued. But don't worry, there won't be any lasting damage. Yamamoto still didn't look as if he compelled. Why believed Suna's story even when they parted ways at his dad's shop, the promise of meeting him forgotten in the excitement of just moments before. As he walked home Suna thought about the question. He'd soon be facing courtesy of Reborn. Seems like I'll have to come clean about some things, he thought forlornly. He had no doubt that the people who had attacked him wouldn't be seen again, but the biggest question was, who had sent them? Omake. Continuation of previous. Suna had been woken up at a reasonable hour, by his alarm clock that is. Something's not right, usually Reborn is here low. Oking awake and trying to break my nose with that hammer of his, he thought. Suddenly he remembered what he'd done the night before to the sugar jar, and didn't feel like getting out of bed and walking downstairs. After a few minutes he decided to just get it over with and got ready for school. Once he entered the kitchen, he noticed Reborn sitting down on one of the chairs, waiting for him. The baby smiled once he saw him. Oh Suna, I'm adding another thing to your list of activities around the house. Smiling nervously while wondering what the crazy baby wanted him to do, he asked what he meant. From now on you'll be making my espresso every morning, Reborn said, smile turning cruel. If possible, the baby looked even more evil when he added, and if it's not to my liking, you have to run 7 laps around Namimori. While I shoot at you. Suna thanked the heavens that he'd worked at a coffee place in one of his lives, and decided that it wasn't worth the trouble to get revenge on his tutor. Unless he wished his life expectancy to lower. Some of you might be wondering who was the person to send that group of people after Suna, and why it was so easy to defeat them, and here's my answer. The character who sent the crazy man's group, referred to as CMG, never intended for CMG to actually defeat Suna, more like let him know that there's someone out there coming for him and make him paranoid and stuff. CMG isn't really important to the story, they were just a group of wizards who were stupid enough to listen to a complete stranger and go to a world they knew nothing about, hence them not knowing about flames. If any of you are wondering about how so many years have passed for Suna yet the CMG was still alive, I'll use the whole time passes differently in different worlds answer. For the CMG maybe 10 or 15 years had gone by, while for Suna it had been considerably more. So sorry for the long author's note, but I just wanted to make sure some of the previous IOUS events were understandable to my readers. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and don't forget to review. Chapter 10. Read the following. I was aware from reading some of my recent reviews that some of my readers weren't really happy about my last chapter, thinking that I was going to suddenly add more HP characters to my fanfic. What I wanted to say was that last chapter will be the last time and why living characters from HP will appear in this fanfiction. The only reason that these seemingly random, unimportant characters appeared was so Suna would know that there's someone out there that can also go to different dimensions. Someone much better at choosing which ones to travel to as well. And no, that character isn't from the HP series at all, and he's not Voldemort either. Voldemort is dead. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 10. Suna was staring at Reborn, getting a sense of déjà vu due to the similarities between his situation now and his first meeting with the baby weeks before. So, what's all this master of death business, Tsunayoshi? I will no longer swallow your lies or half-truths, Suna, but since I know the importance of keeping secrets, I want you to know that you may keep yours as long as you explain to me the scene I've just witnessed. They clearly had no idea about your mafia ties, so this was something else. What was it? What were they after? Wow, it seemed Reborn either really wanted to know about all of this, or he cared about Suna's well-being. After a few moments of silence, Suna opened his mouth and began. They were after a stone, called the Resurrection Stone, by some. Somehow they found out it was currently in my possession and came to take it from me. Reborn looked down at Suna's hand, noticing the ring, silently asking a question with his eyes. Suna smiled wryly. Yes, Reborn, the ring you were previously curious about does indeed contain the Resurrection Stone. Reborn spoke again. What about what they called you? And what does the stone have to with it? Suna's expressionless voice answered him. You see, Reborn, there was once a legend about this stone, along with another 2 objects. All 3 objects were given to 3 mortals by death itself. It was said that the person to possess all 3 would be able to master death itself, with the help of the 3 objects. People searched high and low, but no one was able to own all 3 at once. The history of the objects was surrounded with death and despair. Motioning to the ring he was wearing, he continued. Now the Resurrection Stone here was said to have the power to bring back the dead when someone spun it 3 times, and the very first owner of the stone brought back his dead wife. You must understand that to truly bring back the dead is an impossible feat. And all that he managed to do was bring back part of his wife's soul, condemning her to never have peace in her afterlife. In retaliation of his actions, he eventually committed suicide and killed himself. Reborn seemed engrossed with the story, but as Suna spoke more and more he seemed to get slightly suspicious that the objects were real and not just some legend blown way out of proportion. So, they called you the Master of Death because you have all 3 items. Had. Tsuna spoke. The only remaining item is the ring on my finger, the other 2 were lost many years ago. Reborn decided not to ask how he'd gotten them in the first place, confident that his student would eventually choose to confide in him. So, Reborn looked reluctant to actually be asking this, but continued. Thinking that he had to know. Does the stone really work? As he asked this question, he couldn't help but remember a dear friend of his that had died so long ago, the Sky Archibald Luce. Will I get to see you again? He wondered. Tsuna seemed to have an idea as to what he'd been thinking, and smiled sympathetically at him. It does, but the fate of both the soul called and the one who calls it isn't good. As I said before, the soul called from the afterlife would forever be doomed to an existence as a lost soul, forced to forever wander the living plane but unable to interact with others or even be seen unless by the one who summoned it. He looked serious again. Reborn, you have to believe me when I say that for someone to have that on their conscience, to know that they doomed their loved one to such a fate, is a heavy burden to carry. Suddenly Reborn blinked, as if suddenly realizing something he hadn't known before. You speak from experience, don't you? Tsuna's face was impassive. I am. Who was it? Immediately Reborn regretted his question as he watched Tsuna lock his emotions, his eyes usually filled with so many different emotions becoming an empty hole, making Reborn slightly uncomfortable. A friend who died, was the curt answer he received. I think Ka-san is calling me, I should go help make dinner, goodbye Reborn. As Reborn watched Tsuna walk out of the room, he couldn't help but feel as if his pupil was hiding a very dark secret, a secret which seemed to be eating at him from the inside. He hoped that Tsuna would decide to share his burden with someone else, even if it wouldn't be with him. Tsuna was helping his mother prepare dinner absent-mindedly, his thoughts still lingering on his previous conversation with Reborn. He'd ever thought that such a conversation would have led to him remembering one of the worst moments of his past, of one of the only times his weakness had caused him to make such a horrible mistake. What a life I led! With so many memories forgotten, plenty more trying to be forgotten, but it's never that easy, is it? He asked himself. It's never that easy. You can't just choose the things you want to remember and the things you'd rather erase from your mind completely. I would know, with all the years of lived I have so many regrets, so many things that I know I could have done better. He remembered the anger he'd felt towards Reborn for prying so much into his life, for stirring awake old, forgotten regrets. His anger had been irrational, of course. He realized that now, Reborn just wanted to know about his secretive pupil. It wasn't healthy for their relationship if he kept so many of his secrets to himself. Realizing he was about to cut off his finger, he snapped back to reality. Feeling slightly better now that he'd had a chance to cool down and think rationally about what had happened. But what am I going to do about this, master, person? Who is he? Why does he want the Deathly Hallows? And how did he find out about them? How can he travel dimensions? So many questions bounced around in his head, and he wondered if he already knew the person. He had met many people throughout his many lives after all. For all he knew, the guy had been his uncle in one dimension. Who knew? His life was so strange, hardly anything surprised him anymore. At least I hope Yamamoto is fine. I think he heard more of my conversation with the others than he let on. Sighing, he made his way to his bedroom after quietly eating his dinner, not noticing his mother's concerned face as she watched him eat quietly. Not even mentioning how his day at school had went, and then leave. I guess tomorrow I'll deal with the aftermath of this crazy day. I hope Kiyoya isn't too angry at me for somehow disturbing the peace of Namimori. He came inside his bedroom, and as he began to lose consciousness to wonderful sleep, he noticed that Reborn seemed to be giving him some space to get his emotions under control. He hadn't even tried to take his bed, not even once. These were his last thoughts as he finally fell asleep. Some of you might have noticed that I changed a few minor details about the Hallows. But I think that it's a writer's creative freedom to write different things, or change them. This is an O after all. Next chapter will hopefully be posted in a week or maybe even less. Crosses fingers. In the next chapter, Yamamoto will get suspicious of Tsuna, and start to unravel the mystery that is his best friend. I hope you review, even if it's only to say how much you hated my chapter or something. I don't mind. Well, maybe a little underscore. Don't forget to review. Chapter 11. To show my appreciation, I wrote a long-ish chapter for you guys today. I hope you enjoy it and don't forget to review. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 11. Judime. Thunk. This was a typical morning for one Tsunayoshi Sawada. Get up, escape Reborn's latest assassination attempt, wake-up call. And run out the door after snatching a piece of toast. And getting a fully grown teenager throw himself at him. Gokudera-kun, would you please not throw yourself at me so early in the morning? I just woke up, you know. Gokudera stood up, properly chastised, and apologized for his over-enthusiastic greeting. I'm so sorry, Juudaime. Did I break anything? Suddenly he started poking him in random places, his back, his arms, his face. I am fine, Gokudera-kun. Suna interrupted, hoping his eye wouldn't be the next target. All right, Judime, let's walk to school together. They began to head to school, but stopped once they heard a familiar voice calling to them. Hey Tsuna. Gokudera, wait up. Gokudera's happy expression left his face as he watched Yamamoto come closer to him and his precious Judime. The baseball freak is here. Hello, Takeshi. Suna's smile was showing as he greeted his friend, but the silent Reborn, who had been walking quietly beside Suna and Gokudera, could tell that the smile was slightly forced. As if he was trying too much to make it seem as if everything was normal, as if they hadn't been attacked the day before. Yamamoto's smile also faltered as he realized the same, but quickly reappeared as he started talking to Gokudera, ignoring the insults the Italian kept throwing at him. Suna and Reborn were now walking a few steps behind the two who were engrossed in their argument. And Reborn turned to Suna with a questioning expression. Are you planning on telling him what happened? He has a right to know, you know. If he's going to continue being your friend and hopefully guardian, he ignored Suna's scowl, he needs to know the risks so he doesn't walk into dangerous situations blindly. Suna's changing expression told him everything he needed to know. I'm not going to tell him just yet, Reborn. He said irritably. I will eventually tell him, but only if he asks me himself, and if he looks ready to hear the truth. Reborn didn't look convinced, but nodded thoughtfully. All right. Quote. Finally Yamamoto and Gokudera seemed to have noticed them lagging behind. Hey Suna, baby, it's getting late, we have to get to school in 3 minutes if we don't want Hibari-san to attack us for being late. Gokudera said nothing, but Suna could see that he was walking considerably faster than before. I see he heard of Hibari then, I wonder if he knows that I work with him in his office every day yet. He hadn't joined the other members of the disciplinary committee in the last few days, around the time when Gokudera had arrived, and he knew that his was Hibari's way of letting him know he could take a break from all the stressful things going on lately and spend time with his new friends. Suna looked at his watch. They were late. Gokudera-kun, Takeshi-kun, were late. If any bystander had been walking by at that exact same moment, they would have noticed that as soon as those words left the brunette's mouth, the three boys started running as if the devil was on their tail. And in their opinion, he might as well have been. In their rush to get to school on time, none of them noticed the fedora-wearing baby walk off in a different direction. Hoping to be able to send his newest report to Nono, Hibari had been understanding. He'd heard that they'd lost track of time and told them it was fine, that everyone had their off days sometimes. And then proceeded to give them cookies and ice cream. Yeah, maybe in an alternate universe where impossible things happened, like Reborn not liking coffee or the sky being purple. Quite the opposite happened actually. The actual events which transpired after Reborn nonchalantly walked away were that they had ran as fast as they could, only to find Hibari waiting at the school gates. He had taken one look at them, especially on Suna's sheepish expression, and demanded to know why they'd been so late. Of course, Yamamoto had begun to try to explain, only for Gokudera to butt into the conversation and try talk over his voice. This only served to anger the Skylark more, and they both got bitten to death. Suna's sheepish expression had become amused as he watched some of his only friends interact with one another. Hibari then turned to him with an accusing expression, and Suna once again smiled before he started speaking. I'm sorry, Kiyoya, We really weren't paying attention at the time, and we ran all the way here. Hibari's expression clearly told him his excuse was flimsy at best, and then Hibari spoke again. Stupid omnivore, I thought you were dropping your dame act, yet here you are, acting like a herbivore. Ah, I've been trying Kyoya, but you know, old habits die hard, and all, I've been working on it. Surely you've noticed the slow improvements to my marks at school. Hibari smirked. I have. A few teachers even tried to convince the principal you were cheating somehow, but I persuaded them that it was a bad idea, it would make them look incompetent after all. What kind of a teacher lets a student cheat without catching them in the act? Suna smiled at his friend's expression. What kind of teacher indeed? Hibari's small smile disappeared as he asked about the day before. Who were they? Suna didn't even bother asking who they was. They were the usual assassins hoping to kill the son of the CEDEF leader. You're lying. I checked each of them over personally. And none of them even looked like professionals, some of them were even overweight. The guns were also made very badly and anyone aiming with them would have been way off target. Now tell me, why were they after you? Suna sighed and tried to excuse himself before too many things were revealed prematurely. Hibari, we've been friends a long time now, and I've never demanded to know any of you secrets. And neither have you. While I admit that I'm hiding something from you, you will learn the truth eventually, but I'm just asking you to wait until I feel like I'm ready to tell you. The Skylark's expression of neutrality didn't change, but he nodded. Don't be late to school again, omnivore. With those words he turned and walked away. Suna sighed once more, knowing that the conversation hadn't ended there. And that soon he'd have to tell his best friend the truth, or at least almost most of it. He waited until Yamamoto and Gokudera woke up and they all walked into the school. Suna wondering how long their peace would last. The classroom was loud, the students having begun speaking the moment the teacher left to get some photocopies for their latest assignment. Gokudera and Yamamoto were both with Suna at his table, talking and doing their best to ignore the other ignorant students who were trying to be quiet as they spoke of the newest developments regarding Suna's little group. Can't believe they're hanging out with him. Yeah, Dame Suna, I bet he's blackmailing them to be his friends. They shouldn't have to spend time with that loser. Both of Yamamoto and Gokudera's smile faltered as they heard the other students insulting their best friend. They didn't know what they were talking about. Suna was amazing, and a great friend. Seeing Gokudera start to slip his hand into his jacket pocket, which was where Suna knew that he kept his dynamite, he looked sternly at him. Gokudera-kun, let them talk, their petty insults don't matter to me and they shouldn't matter to you either. Quote, he relaxed along with Yamamoto, who hadn't even been aware of how he'd been acting as if a live bomb was about to set off in the middle of the classroom when Gokudera smirked and relaxed his posture. Of course Judaime, they don't deserve to even be acknowledged by you, and I'll ignore them as well. Yamamoto laughed one of those infectious laughs of his, and slung his arm around both Suna and Gokudera. Yeah Suna, they're just jealous that you have such great friends. Suna smiled at him in gratitude, and Yamamoto also smiled at him. Gokudera smiled, until he realized that Yamamoto still had his arms wrapped around both him and Suna. Hey baseball freak, get your arms off of Judaime. And let go of me. Just as Suna was getting ready to stop him before Gokudera took out his explosives, the teacher came back in, and they all sat down. Settle down everyone. Seeing how everyone was ignoring him, the teacher put his fingers in his mouth and whistled. The loud noise caught everyone's attention and they quieted down. I just wanted to announce that I just finished marking the results for the exam you all took a few weeks ago, and let me tell you, I was very surprised with the results. As the teacher said this, some of the more astute students caught the looks he was sending to Suna as he said this, and wondered why the teacher looked so irritated. It seems a congratulations are in order. Sawada-san passed the exam with a perfect score. The student didn't know what to make of this, wondering what kind of joke the teacher was trying to pull. Dame Suna getting a perfect score on an exam. It was unbelievable. Suddenly Yamamoto and Gokudera began clapping for their embarrassed friend as he went up to collect his exam paper, and some of the girls from their fan clubs joined them in clapping for Suna. As he received his exam, the teacher gave him a look as if saying, I know you cheated somehow and I will prove it. Suna just sent his biggest glare back, and for a second the teacher stumbled backwards, not believing that such a shy student could glare so fiercely. After he sat down, the teacher started calling the other students' names as they each went up to collect their exams. Reborn watched silently while sitting on a tree branch outside, binoculars pointing into the classroom. "You're much smarter than you look, aren't you, Suna?" It was the middle of the afternoon, and Suna was studying with the help of Reborn. The giant piles of explosives had proven to be a great incentive into making him get all the answers perfectly on the first try. He didn't want a maniac baby blowing up his bedroom. "Thank you very much." Reborn pointed to a new question. "Do that one now, and you have less than 40 seconds. Na immediately began answering the complicated, but not overly so math question. Hey, he'd done this before, but things deemed unimportant sometimes got forgotten. If he kept all that information in his brain, it would probably explode or something. Suddenly he sensed someone climbing the tree outside his house. Quickly finishing the question, he tensed briefly and looked behind himself outside the window. Once Reborn saw him doing this, he couldn't help but chuckle a little as he saw who was outside. So the Bovinos have finally tried to get rid of him, huh? Can't say I'm very surprised. Na didn't know what to think of the weird cow-baby hybrid which was currently sitting outside his bedroom window. Just what is that strange kid wearing? Are those cow horns? He decided to do the me as Reborn and ignore the child unless he did something dangerous like fall from the tree or explode or something. From his experience, he knew weirder things had happened and would continue to happen. Just as Reborn finished checking his latest answer, the baby cow jumped into his bedroom through the window and pulled out a gun. He screamed in a high-pitched voice, "Die, Reborn!" and shot the gun at the baby hit man, who didn't even acknowledge the fact that someone had just spoken. Suna decided that Reborn could take care of himself, and sat quietly watching to see what would happen next. The cow pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. Suna's sweat dropped. Does this kid know exactly what he's doing? Kid started sniffling, and he looked like he was about to cry, when suddenly Hi's mood turned around completely and he jumped up, yelling at Reborn with a cocky smirk on his face. "Long time no see, Reborn, it's me, Lambo." Reborn just continued sipping his espresso and looking through Suna's homework. I see that you did the second question on this sheet incorrectly, you see." The baby cow, Lambo, suddenly yelled again. "Reborn, don't ignore me, I'll kill you." He charged at Reborn, but he only got a punch in the face for his efforts. After getting his face off of the floor, he spoke again. "I must have tripped." "Yeah, sure, that's what happened," Suna thought sarcastically. He continued, Lambo-san. 5 years old, from Italy, a hitman from the Bovino familia, tripped. Favorite foods are grapes and candy, and Lambo-san, who met Reborn at a bar, just tripped ... Suna was officially baffled. He sure as hell hadn't seen this one coming his way, but he figured that in his own annoying way, this Lambo was cute. Lambo seemed to realize that Reborn still wasn't listening, when he suddenly reached into his big afro and pulled out a bazooka. How did that even fit in there? Lambo started speaking as he took it out. "Ta-da, it's the 10-year bazooka. Those who are shot with this can, for 5 minutes, switch with themselves from 10 years into the future ... Time travel?" Suna asked incredulously inside his head. "How is that possible? I've never heard of such technology. The closest thing I've ever seen to that were time turners." He looked down at the bazooka and seemed to have decided it wasn't worth it, so he put it back and took out a hand grenade. "Die, Reborn." He threw the grenade at him, only to have it reflected back and be thrown out the window along with it. Suna, feeling concerned for the clumsy Lambo, stood up to try and look out the window to check if the grenade had actually exploded. A few seconds later he saw the explosion happen, and turned accusing eyes over to Reborn. Finally looking up from the work he'd been looking over, the baby spoke. "Relax, Suna. That cow suit he was wearing should have been more than enough protection against such a weak explosive. Either way, it's the Bovino familia, they're a rather small mafia group. I don't associate with those who rank lower, it's beneath me." Immediately Suna's small frown deepened, and he looked irritated that Reborn could act so high and mighty to those he thought he was better than, just because they weren't as powerful as him. Suna scowled once more at Reborn, but the baby's pride wasn't allowing him to apologize for the egotistic remark, convincing himself that he had done nothing wrong. Without a single look back, Suna turned around and went downstairs, hoping to be able to help the other child, his protective instincts taking over. Lambo was crying. What else was new? He didn't know what could have possibly gone wrong. All he'd ever wanted to do in life was become the boss of the Bovino Familia, make all of humanity bow down to him, but after nay of his most amazing creations had backfired a little, more like explode and destroyed 2 buildings. His boss had told him he had to defeat the super first-class assassin Reborn, who he'd met before. He remembered it like it was yesterday. When he had first been taken to that bar by his boss, he'd sat beside him in the counter. They'd spoken a lot, even though it had been their first time meeting. He'd been eating one of his favorite things in the world, grapes. And Reborn had been blowing bubbles with his nose, sleeping __. So he'd gone all the way to Japan to kill Reborn, but he'd been ignored. The great Lambo-sama had been ignored by Reborn. So as he sat on the ground underneath the now badly burned and possibly dead tree, he saw the other guy Reborn had been with walk up to him and kneel down. "Here you go, Lambo," the other guy said happily, handing him a piece of candy. It wasn't grape, but it looked good, so Lambo immediately took it out of its wrapper and put it in his mouth. As he took his time savoring his new candy, the guy took out a first aid kit and began to clean his cuts and bruises. Lambo was so happy. No one had ever cared about him before, apart from his mama. He started crying again. Suna looked up, startled and wondering if he had hurt him somewhere, but Lambo seemed to be smiling as he cried, and so Suna picked him up and carried him into the house. Smiling now that he knew Lambo was okay. After he'd placed down Lambo on the couch and fetched a blanket for him, he heard him mumble just before he fell asleep. "The great Lambo-sama wants to stay with Oni-san. And we can take over the world together, and beat Reborn, and then people will worship us." Suna smiled at the sleepy mumbles Lambo had uttered, and felt happy about his new nickname. Now he knew what it was like to feel like an older brother. He knew that from that moment on he would always try his best to protect Lambo, even if it was from a family that didn't seem to appreciate him, tried to send him to his death. "I fulfilled my promise and updated in less than a week. It wasn't even a short chapter like before either. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and in the next one we'll see the aftermath of Suna's small argument with Reborn. Will it be forgotten, or will it get worse? Find out on the next chapter of Death's Curse. P.S. Don't forget to review Chapter 12. Please read the "and" at the bottom of the chapter. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 12. Suna jumped up, throwing himself off of the bed the moment he heard the scream coming from the kitchen downstairs. Quickly running down the stairs at a fast speed, he soon came upon the kitchen. It was chaos. The walls were splattered with a green, gooey substance he didn't want to know the name of. While the once clean and orderly kitchen was now completely destroyed. Reborn was of course calmly sipping his espresso while sitting on the table, completely ignoring the crying and screaming child. Currently jumping off the walls. Throwing projectiles, he seemed to have an endless amount of from his afro. "Must stay calm." Lambo seemed to be saying this over and over, his voice getting louder. As Reborn continued to ignore his tantrum, he took out his 10-year bazooka and aimed at himself. He fired, and suddenly pink smoke was flying all around him as he became impossible to see. Suna started going towards Lambo, momentarily forgetting just what the weapon was able to do, but stopped in his tracks, shock showing on his face. "Wah, it seems my younger self seems to have used the 10-year bazooka. And I was just about to win as well, oh well." Lambo was gone, and in his place stood a tall teenager. A teenager that looked achingly familiar to Suna. "Lambo." Teenage Lambo turned to look around and noticed Suna looking at him completely stupefied. Reborn seemed to have noticed the emotions on the boy's face as well, because now he was staring at Suna with a suspicious look on his face. Why does he look so surprised? Lambo's face softened when he noticed the young Suna in front of him, and he smiled with sympathy on his face. He acted as if he knew exactly what Tsuna had been thinking when he saw him. Seeing that Tsuna wasn't going to be talking or saying anything anytime soon, he started speaking. Hello little PR Decimo. Both Tsuna and Reborn seemed to have caught his slip, one wondering what he'd meant to say while the other was once more surprised. Tsuna's mind was going into overdrive. Was he just about go say what I thought he was going to say? Why would he call me Primo? How could he even know to call me Primo? Reborn was wondering what he'd planned on saying as well. What could possibly be so secret that he, the world's best hitman, wasn't allowed to know? And from Tsuna's expression it seemed he knew what Idiot Cow had been about to say as well. Lambo coughed awkwardly once the silence continued, both Reborn and Tsuna's gazes continuing to be directed at him. He felt as if lasers were being pointed at him. So, what's going on with younger me? Has Ryohei joined yet? Seeing the looks he received, he winced. Probably shouldn't have said that. Tsuna, who finally seemed to have regained his usual attitude, spoke. Sasagawa-senpai joins the mafia as well. Lambo nodded, pretty sure that it was too late to take back his earlier words. Mirda, Hibari's going to take my candy from me again. No, not my grape candy. Unaware of Lambo's inner turmoil over his precious candy, Tsuna opened his mouth to ask another question, when sudden. Pink smoke appeared once more and teenage Lambo was gone, replaced by the child Lambo who seemed to be eating something, a grape candy. Tsuna felt disappointed. For a moment there it had almost been as if Lambo had been there. His old lightning guardian, after so many years. Of course he knew that it wasn't really him, but it had been nice to be around someone who acted so much like him. The feeling he got though, it was very bittersweet. Lambo seemed to have calmed down after his trip to the future, if his happy humming was any indication. He was doing a funny dance of jumping up and down as he ate his candy. Noticing that he was back, he opened his mouth and stared at Tsuna with a wide happy smile. Ha ha ha, the great Lambo has returned from the future. It was great. There was a huge house and many people in suits were walking around, and then Nissan was there as well. You looked taller, and you gave Lambo a grape candy. Tsuna sighed with relief. At least someone was happy, and he couldn't say he wasn't satisfied to know he'd be taller in the future. Reborn just drank his espresso, silently fuming over the fact that teenage Lambo had ignored him. Lambo spoke again, confusion evident in his tone of voice. Tsuna ni is going to become Vongola Decimo, right? Both Tsuna and Reborn nodded. Of course Tsuna was going to be Decimo, Reborn thought. Wasn't that the whole point of me coming here? Then why did Lambo-san hear people calling him Primo? I'm so sorry for the short chapter again. It's just that this week I've been drowning in homework, projects, and I have to study for 2 exams next week. I'm also sorry about ending the chapter in a sort of cliffhanger. Next chapter will be interesting at least. Hope you enjoyed my very short, but hopefully interesting chapter. And don't forget to review Chapter 13. That was my reaction when I saw how many reviews I got for the last chapter. Thank you all so much for your reviews and support. I really appreciate it. Those of you who wished me luck on my exams as well, thank you all so much. I can't say how glad I am that I won't have more exams for the next few weeks. It feels really liberating to know it's all finally over. In this chapter you'll find out some of the things going on in the future, and some scenes will be added even though Lambo wasn't actually there when they happened. I just thought it'd old give you a few clues as to what would happen in the future, or just give you more questions _. Warning. This FIC may contain many cliches known to fanfic readers everywhere, but I hope that at least some of my ideas are original. If not, well, this is fanfiction, people. We can't all be geniuses at literature. Death's Curse. Chapter 13. Primo. Why would they call the Vongola Decimo Primo? The question was going around Reborn's head in circles, possible reasons being considered and dismissed just as quickly. Looking at Tsuna's slowly changing face, he noticed the look of horror and despair that seemed to have appeared the moment Lambo had uttered those words. Slowly, he started remembering little things he'd noticed about Tsuna. He was an excellent fighter. He had known so much about the mafia. He looked remarkably like Primo. No, it was impossible. There was no way that what he was thinking was the truth. Throughout his life in the mafia he had seen some very strange and wonderful Full things happened, but there was no way that Suna was Jado, was there? Lambo didn't know what was going on. First he'd woken up to see that his Nissan wasn't in the room, and when he'd gone to the kitchen to get a snack or grapes, he'd found Reborn there drinking some kind of brown, icky-smelling liquid. After trying to once again speak to Reborn about how to kill him, he was ignored. The great Lambo had been ignored. Of course, this had caused him to decide to kill Reborn without them talking first, thinking that with his weapons it'd be easy, but then Reborn seemed to jump, or teleport away. It wasn't fair, but he'd had a great idea. Yes. He'd gotten out his bazooka, and he'd shot himself. Suddenly he found that his surroundings had changed. He was inside this huge mansion, with paintings surrounding him and a bunch of people quickly walking past, ignoring him. Lambo had gotten so angry at being ignored again that he began to cry. He would later deny this until a man came up to him. "Hello there, Lambo," the man had said to him. Lambo looked up and saw that it was his Nissan. He looked taller. Once he'd stopped crying, Suna had picked him up and taken him into another room. It was big and there were bookshelves on all the walls, intimidating him a bit. He sat down on a big comfy chair and Suna sat beside him. "How are you, Lambo?" he asked gently. "Are you living with me right now?" Lambo gave a big smile and jumped up on the chair. "Ha ha ha, the great Lambo has already met Suna ni, and is now living with him," he shouted in triumph. Suna gave a smile. Ambo too happy to notice the fact that his eyes looked tired and his smile didn't look completely genuine. Before Suna could say anything else, the door swung open and a man ran inside. "Primo, one of our safe houses has just been bombed," the man shouted quickly. Suna immediately got to his feet. His whole demeanor had completely changed from the kind man who'd just been talking to Lambo into someone more serious, powerful. "Let's take this outside," he said while looking at Lambo. Both men walked into another room after Suna made sure to give Lambo a piece of candy. "Whose was it?" he asked. The other man seemed to steel himself for what he was about to say. "The Sasagawa's." Suna's strong attitude seemed to disappear, as the severity of the situation was realized. "Where is Ryohei?" he asked, fearing what the answer would be. "We don't know, Primo. He was the first to hear the news. The moment he found out he left headquarters, we're not sure where he went." "Do you think he went after them?" he asked the other man. Before he could answer the question, Suna snorted and shook his head. "What a stupid question. Of course he went after them, they just killed his little sister, for God's sake." Suna once again looked at his employee, one of the people who had recently moved here after Varia HQ had been hit 2 months before. The Varia itself was missing, the only known fact being that they hadn't died in the explosion which had killed more than 2,000 mafiosos. "Mirda," he cursed. "When is this hell finally going to end? We've been playing cat and mouse with them for more than a year. And so far we've got nothing more than empty buildings and idiotic riddles out of them." Suna turned and walked away into another room along with the other man, Lambo forgotten in the moment. The only thought he spared before he left was, "Lambo better not give anything away about the future to Reborn or even myself, who knows how things might change because of one tiny slip-up." Suna was watching as Reborn seemed to be figuring something out. Surely he wouldn't stumble across the truth just like that, right? How could one simple slip of the tongue from a child uncover his most closely guarded secret? Single quote. After a few seconds which felt like minutes, Reborn looked at Suna with a harsh glint in his eyes. "Who are you really, Tsunayoshi?" Just as those words came out of the baby's mouth, Suna felt his head get dizzy, his surroundings spinning and the colors blurring together until finally, he lost consciousness. Suna woke up, finding himself in a familiar Te void had not been what he'd been expecting. "Hello, Death. I know you're here somewhere," he shouted into the endless-looking surroundings. I felt surreal that after all these years he'd finally been summoned once again by Death. "Hello, Master," a voice said mockingly from behind him. Quickly spinning around he found himself face to face with Death. "How are you liking your new life?" his voice said, coming from under the hood of his cloak. Suna immediately knew that it had been no mere coincidence that he's ended up reborn as Sawada Tsunayoshi, heir to the title of Vongola 10th. And it Was certainly no coincidence that all of his closest friends seemed to be so familiar to the looks and personalities of his previous guardians. Was this your plan all along? To torment me with the faces of those long dead? I lost them years ago, I acknowledge their deaths, why are you bringing up painful memories? Haven't you tortured me enough? Death just looked at him and answered. Don't you understand, Master? This is what would have happened to you eventually anyway. Ever since the day you were born, it was your destiny to own all three of my hallows. You had no choice in the matter, and I, in my foolish thinking, didn't believe that there would one day be someone to own all three. You have chained me. I am no longer the independent entity that I once was. I have been sullied by your human emotions. The moment you touched the hallows was the moment that death finally changed forever. Suna was surprised, but despite this he felt an undeserved hatred towards death. He'd never asked for this either. He'd been just as innocent if not more. How could he have possibly known that the hallows would lead to such a curse on his existence? But deep inside he hated himself as well because he knew that if he had a chance to change it, to never have opened that package on that Christmas day so long ago, he would have still done it, because without the hallows the war would have never been won. And peace would have been a hopeless dream for him and his family. Death continued, as if finally they could get rid of all the frustration they felt towards Suna. We are connected. No matter how much I wish to kill you, I cannot, for if you were to die I would as well. A world without death would be anarchy, chaos, hell itself. His voice calmed down and he continued. So you see, Master, that is your fate, and there is nothing you can do to change it unless you wish to be selfish and ruin the lives of all the people in the world. His voice turned mocking. Think of all the poor families out there who would die, but be unable to reach the afterlife. All the mommies and daddies and all the small kiddies who wouldn't even know what was going on. Just wandering the earth as mere shadows, hiding from the eyes of those who are living. Doesn't that ring a bell to you? Remember that day in the Forbidden Forest, when Mommy and Daddy Potter came out of the stone? Shut up. Suna had finally had enough of Death's mocking and bringing up bad memories. He had been innocent at the time, no one had warned him of the fate of those called from the stone's power. He hadn't even learned of their fate until his first meeting with Death. Death just laughed, taking joy from his suffering. And didn't you like your little gift? He made sure you would find it. After all, who knows what it might do in the wrong hands. Single quote. Suna remembered the note he'd found along with the resurrection stone. That was you. Death just laughed harder. Of course it wasn't, little master. Why would I take any interest in your life? I'm just a servant, remember. The mystery continues then, Suna thought. If Death wasn't the one to give me the ring, then who was? He knows who it was though. Not that I'll have much of a chance of making him tell me. Death suddenly cocked his head to the side, as if listening to something. It seems that our time is almost up, but hey, I forgot to tell you, he said cheerfully. That little baby Reborn had guessed one of your secrets, and me being the hard-working servant that I am, he said mockingly. I decided to erase Lambo's little slip-up from their memories. When you wake up it'll be as if nothing had happened. So don't say I never do nice things for you. It was with those last words that Suna found that the world was once again spinning, and he passed out. Again. Suna ni. Tsuna ni. Suna blinked, and he found Lambo's face right in front of his, the small child having actually procured a small ladder from somewhere while Reborn was nowhere to be seen. Sorry Lambo, I guess I spaced out for a moment, he said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Lambo seemed to believe him. That's okay Suna ni, Reborn does that a lot as well. I'm sure he does, Suna thought, knowing that Lambo was talking about the times when Reborn falls asleep with his eyes open. Anyway, he said, why don't you go and help my mom with things and I'll go to school, okay? Lambo instantly threw himself at his leg, locking his arms around him. Suna ni can't leave Lambo. Suna began to try and placate him. Don't worry Lambo, I'm not leaving you, I'll be back in a few hours. Lambo looked at him with teary eyes. Promise. Suna nodded. Promise. After Lambo let go of his leg, he yelled a goodbye for his mother and walked to school. The recent events playing over and over in his mind. Probably not what most of you were expecting, right? I know some of the things that happened in this chapter seem a bit weird when you read them in the future scene just didn't seem right to me, but later on it'll make better sense. Promise. I thank once again all of those who reviewed and read my ridiculously short chapters, and hopefully this one isn't as disappointing. Hope you like this chapter and don't forget to review. It's been more than a week and I haven't updated, and I have even more bad news. This story is officially going into hiatus until the school year is over, and for me that's at the end of June. Once again I apologize, but I'm just not finding any free time for myself in order to write a new chapter. I hope you don't abandon this story. I promise to be back on the first week of July at the latest, promise. This story is not abandoned.